Welcome, everybody, to the Super Bowl recap. We're here to break down the Kansas City Chiefs winning back-to-back Super Bowl titles. We're here to talk about Kyle Shanahan. We're here to talk about the awards. We're here to talk about the NBA trade deadline. We're here to talk about a lot of things today. So you're in the right place. We're here to break it all down. If you missed the Super Bowl, if you're living under a Dwayne Johnson, we're here to break it all down for you.
Yeah, if you're living under a Dwayne Johnson, we are here to break down all of the magic that happened during the Super Bowl. And this was a Super Bowl that had so many storylines and had two very distinct curses on both sides. On one hand, you had the Kansas City Chiefs, and there's a very famous bettor who had picked not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 16 straight Super Bowls wrong. And he picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win that Super Bowl. And then you had none other than Mr. Drizzy Dre himself, Drake, betting on the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, you heard it right. The lesbian himself bet on the Kansas City Chiefs to win. And then, you know, from there, you're like, okay, well, you have the Drake curse. He predominantly curses his team. The Raptors have only won one championship while Drake has been rooting for them. Then on the other side, and the reason why I picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win, you have the curse of Kirk Cousins, and it just wasn't the right time to break that curse, where the San Francisco 49ers had lost to Kirk Cousins, and no team that has lost to Kirk Cousins has ever come back from that and won a Super Bowl. So you had that curse. Then you also had the curse where no coach who has gotten back to a Super Bowl and rematch with the coach who has beaten him has ever won the rematch, a la Bill Belichick versus Tom Coughlin.
Exactly. So a lot of things going into it. The game itself, on paper, I felt was very interesting. We saw the kind of like what we predicted. We said the 49ers are going to get out to a lead, and then the Chiefs are going to chisel back, maybe get some stops. The second half, they had 3 straight punts, that being the 49ers, and slowly but surely they creeped back into the game, went into overtime, the second game in Super Bowl history to go to overtime, and then, like magic, as we expected, marched down the field. Patrick Mahomes, 8 for 8, 69 yards, 1 touchdown on that final drive, and sealed the deal for the Chiefs to be the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowls since the 04 Patriots.
Yeah, and it wasn't not only kind of like how we predicted it, it went down exactly like how we predicted it. We said specifically the 49ers were going to go out to a 10-point lead, and then Patrick Mahomes would lead his team down on a drive to win the game, and I believe I picked the score to be 26-23, or either that, it was 24-21, but either way, we were only 1 point off from predicting the Super Bowl exactly, and then we had another Super Bowl go to overtime in a first half where a lot of people were like kind of falling asleep. They didn't like the defensive battle, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm here for 2 great head coaches matching up with each other, seeing how the adjustments unfold, and then who is going to win that matchup. And the reason why we both picked the Chiefs is more often than not, Steve Spagnuolo is going to win that matchup when it comes to those adjustments. The only one he hasn't been able to win it against is Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And then the other side, Kyle Shanahan historically has not been able to make the adjustments, has not been able to hold a lead. You have 3 Super Bowls right now. Offensive coordinator, 28-3, lead gone. Up 10 points in the fourth quarter against the Kansas City Chiefs the first time they match up. Lead gone. Up 10 points the second time they face the Chiefs. Lead gone. And then you have a very uncharacteristic play from Christian McCaffrey where he fumbles and it kind of looked like the ball just got tapped out. Didn't even look like that aggressive of a hit. And then you had on the other side, 21 Savage himself, Isaiah Pacheco, getting the ball stripped down at the goal line. So you had equal turnovers, and it really came down to, unfortunately, those goddamn kickers, Jake Booty himself missing an extra point. And I ask you, if he made that extra point, do the 49ers sit here as Super Bowl championships? Or do you think the Kansas City Chiefs put the pedal to the metal and end up getting the touchdown and we don't go to overtime?
Honestly, I think the Chiefs probably still would have prevailed, but that's a narrative that could be spoken about. They had Jake Moody. This is the same guy for about an hour, had the record for longest field goal in Super Bowl history. And then Harrison Butker says, hold my legs, I'm going to get another field goal, and immediately breaks that record. And then you want to talk about the worst time to have an extra point missed? Jake Moody, who we say, what have we said about kickers all season? If they don't have a cool name and they don't have a good nickname, they suck. Well, Jake Moody's nickname is Jake Booty for a reason, because when it matters, that man is about as clutch as I don't know, insert in.
A doorknob?
I was going somewhere and then I lost it, but just assume that it was funny. Insert funny joke. But they had the opportunity in their hands. I felt like this is a game that the 49ers lost. You had a 10-point lead. You have Christian McCaffrey, who's Offensive Player of the Year. Arguably should have been MVP. We'll go over that later. You had all the talent there. You had the lead. All you needed to do was just push the metal to the gas. The Chiefs were struggling on offense. They were sputtering in the first half. And then, as we predicted, can't bet against the Chiefs. You can't bet for Kyle Shanahan in the Super Bowl with a 10-point lead. And now, when history repeats itself, we say that's a coincidence. But when history continues to repeat itself, we have a pattern.
Yeah.
And now with Kyle Shanahan, this is the third Super Bowl, had a 10-point lead, and just doesn't come into it when it matters.
Yeah, it doesn't come into it and it matters. And I don't think it's necessarily on Kyle Shanahan. And some of it is his play calling in this game. I thought at some points he got away from the run a little bit, and I get trying to throw on those passing downs, but when you're throwing with Brock Purdy, he looked a little bit small in this game, especially with that Chris Jones-led pass rush for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you also have the situation where Christian McCaffrey is the Offensive Player of the Year. He was able to run the ball a little bit up the middle, and then they kept falling behind the chains. And I was like, why aren't you just running the ball on first down, screen on second down, and then run some draws on third down? Just take a little bit more of the pressure off of Brock Purdy. And I feel like in this game, that's always the criticism of Kyle Shanahan. It's like, wow, he has the best run design of any coach in the league, but when it matters most, he's throwing the ball when he really shouldn't be throwing the ball. You're up 10 points. You can sit back there, and I'm fine with you dying by Christian McCaffrey not being able to get it going. I'm fine with you dying by not having Elijah Mitchell being able to do anything really in this game. But you don't need to throw on those critical first downs. Just keep yourself ahead of the chain. Just make it a little bit easier for Brock Purdy in these situations. And I thought my biggest concern with the San Francisco 49ers was their defense coming into it. I thought their defense showed a little bit of weakness against the Packers, showed a little bit of weakness against the Lions. And then in the first half, they played really well. But when everyone wanted to jump on Brock Purdy saying he's the weak link, he's going to be the reason why they lost, I'm like, wait a minute. Look at the Kirk Cousins game. Kirk Cousins, without Justin Jefferson, plays out of his mind and beats the San Francisco 49ers. I believe it was on Sunday night or Monday Night Football.
Primetime.
And then you have even Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, or as PJ Walker was able to cut him up a little bit. So I'm like, are we putting all of the blame on Brock Purdy, or with this defense who has Fred Warner, has Nick Bosa, has Javon Hargrave on that defense, Diamador Lenore, all of these players on that defense, and you couldn't get one single stop to help out your quarterback? He played pretty much even with Patrick Mahomes. He played a cleaner game with Patrick Mahomes because Mahomes had the interception. So it's like, is he really the weakest link on the team? It's like, no, the defense didn't come up with big stops when they needed it, when they were stopping the Chiefs every single time in the first half, forcing 3 and outs. And the Chiefs had, I believe it was 14 straight scoring drives in the playoffs. And the 49ers were able to crack that, but Steve Wilkes just couldn't make the adjustments.
Yeah, I think a lot of this goes on Steve Wilkes. And this is a guy who was having interviews for head coaching roles for one point. And I really felt in the second half, they abandoned what they were doing well in the first half, which was containing them. Isaiah Pacheco wasn't getting loose like you expect him to. And then a lot of these guys were well covered. It took some pretty incredible Mahomes plays in order for them to get the first downs. And I want to say in the first quarter, they only had 1 first down.
Yeah.
So the defense was the missing link. I know that we saw Trey Greenlaw go down and we saw a few other guys go down, but that's no excuse. This team is stacked. They were one of the best defenses all year. And then they showed against the Packers that they couldn't stop them. They showed against Jared Goff. And then when you have to face off against someone like Mahomes, like obviously that's a taller task, but you had them contained in the first half. And then I don't know what happened in the second half, but they lost almost all momentum. I don't know if it was how bad the Usher performance was or whatever it was, but something was off. Usher even said it himself. Oh my gosh, something's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know, bad puns today. I got to get new writers.
Yeah, something was wrong in that situation. But like in the first half, the 49ers, like the frustrating part was they were doing such a good job of containing Patrick Mahomes in the pocket. They were all staying in their lanes. They were disciplined. Nick Bosa was kind of just holding the edge there. And then they lost that. in the second half. Like, you let Mahomes get free, and really Mahomes scrambling with his legs was the biggest part of the Super Bowl that they were able to take advantage, because it really is Travis Kelce and then McCole Hardman out of nowhere. In the Super Bowl, it's always the guy who's like hasn't done anything all year long, and then you're like,
Jennings too.
oh, who is this guy? He's just showing up out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, McCole Hardman makes the two biggest plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. And all day long, Patrick Mahomes was hitting guys in the hands. There were drops, but we saw MVS. McCole Hardman make some big plays in the Super Bowl when it mattered the most. And then you can only contain Travis Kelce for so long. And the people I was sitting with was like, oh, Kelce's not doing anything. I'm like, just wait till the second half. He's going to go crazy on these people.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then for the 49ers, it was tough because Trey Greenlaw goes down. Then George Kittle goes down. You weren't really able to get him involved. And then you have two of your best weapons on offense and defense go down this game. And then you kind of saw the 49ers get tired throughout the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs have been beating people up. Now, do you think that's because the Swifties pulled the fire alarm in the hotel, and it wasn't because Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey? I know they were very upset about it. They said it was some conspiracy. They even said Philadelphia designed a demolition of a bridge exactly for the NFC Championship game where they faced them, just to interrupt their sleep. Do you think that played any factor at all with them getting tired?
Oh, 100%. And I definitely blame the Swifties. If you've ever talked to a Swiftie, if you've ever interacted with Swifties, Swifties are fucking crazy. You don't want to piss them off, because soon enough, you go out to your car and suddenly there are no tires on your car, or your tires are slashed, or your windows are broken. Swifties are fucking crazy. They're crazier than horse girls. Don't mess with them.
They are horse girls.
They usually go hand in hand. But I definitely think that played a part in whether it was the Kelseys, whether it was the Swifties, or whether it was just very diehard Eagles fans that came up all the way to Vegas. I don't know. But something was wrong, and I felt like the 49ers are the best cursed team at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they continuously make it to the Super Bowl. They've made it to 3 in the last decade, roughly. And then it always happens. They have a lead. They had a lead even in the Ravens game when Kyle Shanahan wasn't there. They blew that. Then there was the lights going out, and then they had these 10-point lead against the Chiefs. And then there's something there, whether it's the injuries that occur, whether it's the lights literally going out, or them just blowing leads. I don't know what it is with the 49ers. They are the best cursed team in the NFL right now.
Yeah, they're definitely the best cursed team in the NFL at this point. And it's a situation where if you keep getting to the Super Bowl, you clearly had the best roster in this game. I mean, the 49ers offensively and defensively, you can say that the Kansas City Chiefs defense is better. And whether that comes down to just the coordinator or the talent and Trey Greenlaw getting hurt, there's an argument to be had there. But you have Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, and Nick Bosa on that line, and Chase Young out of nowhere, another guy who we were waiting to do something all year long, who may have gotten himself paid, because when you show up in the Super Bowl, then teams are going to be like, okay, didn't do anything in the regular season, but if we can kind of have him in our rotation and he'll be able to make a play in the Super Bowl, I guess that's good enough for us. So he potentially earned himself a contract because of this, but you still have the more talented team all around. But it did come down to Patrick Mahomes being able to make the plays at the end of the game, and then just wide open McCole Hardman in overtime.
Yeah, McCole Hardman, a guy who finally left. He went to the Jets, didn't do anything for the Jets. I think he ended up having like 6 catches for them. They trade for him at the deadline, doesn't really do anything after that. And then when it matters most, he was the guy that stepped up, had that big touchdown. And then on the other side, like, talk about another guy who definitely more part of the offense, but Jawan Jennings had a game of his life on the other side of the ball. 2 guys who historically are 3rd or 4th receivers, and they went up and stood up when it mattered. But I think what really came down to it was the battle of the defensive coordinators. Yeah. Because we saw Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes play pretty similarly. Obviously, Patty had probably better numbers overall, but Steve Spagnuolo and Steve Wilks, and where they break down all time. Steve Wilks did a great job throughout the season building that team up. But Steve Spagnuolo, who has now taken down the undefeated Patriots, they've gone on, and obviously he's had his success with the Chiefs as well. Where does Steve Spagnuolo rank as far as like all-time great defensive coordinators?
He's right there with Bill Belichick at this point. I mean, you mentioned it. He's going toe to toe with Bill Belichick. He's been able to shut down not only Tom Brady, but two San Francisco 49ers team who have had the best rushing attack and the top rated offense. And then when you think of offensive minds in the league, it's really just Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and then you can throw in like a Matt LaFleur or a Dan Campbell if you want to, but it's really those two guys when you think of premier offensive coordinators in the league. And he's knocked off not one, but both of those guys, and then Tom Brady himself, who is the supercomputer at this point, and then ruining their undefeated season. So I think Steve Spagnuolo deserves a lot of credit. He shut down the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, and they were running over teams. He shut down the Bills when people were saying, oh, it might be not only just a Buffalo Bills win at home, but it might be a runaway blowout, which is absolutely insane to me that people in the media were able to sprout this bullshit about the Bills. Like,
propaganda.
Yeah, they may blow out the Chiefs. I'm like, are you out of your goddamn mind? The Buffalo Bills blowing out the Chiefs, but really the only game with Steve Spagnuolo you can point to where he got out-coached was against Zach Taylor with the Cincinnati Bengals, because they had the perfect game plan, completely flipped the script on them. But that was also a testament to Lou Anarumo as well. But I think as far as best defensive coordinators in the league, it's Spagnuolo at this point, and the fact that no one is considering him to be a head coach is crazy to me. And he may just like his gig in Kansas City because he gets to be a part of one of the greatest runs of any team in the modern era, and they're now approaching the Terry Bradshaw Steelers if they get another Super Bowl there. You know, Terry Bradshaw is no Patrick Mahomes, but that defense, the steel curtain was real there. So you get another Super Bowl, then you're with the Joe Montana run, you're with the Terry Bradshaw Pittsburgh Steelers run, and then the next leg ahead of that is the mountain that is climbing up the Patriots dynasty. But you only have 3 more Super Bowls to go, and Patrick Mahomes is only 28.
Yeah, it's incredible what we've seen. First of all, getting that monkey off his back, the back-to-back Super Bowls. I know that's something that he really wanted to do this year, having his team stay focused through it all, being able to make it to 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls. And then obviously he's made it to every single AFC title game since he started. So they're really building a pretty fantastic legacy for them right now. And I think that if we're comparing them to some of these other great dynasties, whether it be the Steelers of the 70s or the Niners of the 80s, the Cowboys of the 90s, I think they won 3 straight at one point. And then ultimately the Patriots of the 2000s and the 2010s, we're looking at something pretty spectacular. And what I like about this show compared to other media heads or other just, whether it be Twitter or whatever else, is appreciating it, because this is something that we only see once a generation. We're seeing somebody who's 28. The only real person who can actually eclipse Brady is Patrick Mahomes. And right now, his numbers are better. His championships, he's ahead of schedule. Do you think that he has a chance to surpass him at any point?
Yeah, he definitely has a chance to surpass him, but it's going to be a lot of questions, because you'll have one end where people, if he falls short of the Super Bowls of Tom Brady, or even if he gets 7 and ties Tom Brady, at least for me personally, it'll go back to, okay, well, what happened when they played each other? And we have 2 very specific games where Tom Brady blows him out in the Super Bowl. It's Tom Brady's first blowout win in a Super Bowl. And then you have Tom Brady going to Arrowhead, having the ball in his hands last, scoring in overtime with a less talented offense than Patrick Mahomes had. Patrick Mahomes not really showing up in the first half at all in that game. And if he did, you probably win that game. And Tom Brady was able to beat him in Arrowhead, though, when you had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So that's going to be the real thing you can point to where, wait a minute, we've seen Tom Brady play Patrick Mahomes, and Tom Brady has outplayed him in both of those games. And that's really what it's going to come down to. But on the other hand, you see the talent with Patrick Mahomes, and the Aaron Rodgers argument was, well, Aaron Rodgers is a better thrower of the football. Aaron Rodgers has a better touchdown to interception ratio, and he's going to have better stats than Tom Brady. But then you'll also be like, okay, did he have better stats than Tom Brady? Or is it just because the modern era where the rules are a little bit looser and geared to the wide receivers?
I think we're setting up for a great debate, because you mentioned the Aaron Rodgers part of it too. I think Patrick Mahomes will have the eye test, jumps off the screen a little bit more, obviously more mobile. But at the same time, we have a little bit of data with Brady watching as those rules slowly start to aim more to the offense. And we saw Brady, even in this last year, throw for 5,000 yards, have these great numbers. And in Tampa, his numbers are extremely gaudy. And this is a guy who was in his middle of his 40s at the time, still throwing for 40 touchdowns, still throwing for 4,000, 5,000 yards. So we can kind of see it transition into Patrick Mahomes at that case. I think that he'll eventually be eclipsed because I think the media is going to want to push for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, surpassing him. I don't know whether or not he'd need to get 7 necessarily, but I think if we're talking about all-time greats, right? Really, the bar for the longest time was getting 3, and that was at that point you're in the conversation with the Joe Montanas of the world and some of these other guys. A lot of these guys end up only having 2. We saw Peyton Manning have 2. We saw Big Ben have 2, and now he has 3, which separates him from those guys. And then so now I think if he gets 5, then he's in a conversation with with Tom Brady where he has, no one else has more. And then eventually I think getting as many titles as him is going to be a hard accomplishment, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think it's possible, and he's ahead of schedule where Tom Brady was at his career, and Tom Brady had that lull in the middle of his career, so it'll really come down to the matchups where Tom Brady, hey, we did see them face off in a Super Bowl, and we saw how that went, and then we saw Brady go on the road to Patrick Mahomes' house and beat him, and there's only 2 people, though, that have beat Patrick Mahomes, and it was kind of the same with Brady, where it took Peyton Manning a long time to do that, and it was kind of when it was in Denver, you had DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, that incredible defense, or it was the Baltimore Ravens, but Tom Brady always owned the Steelers. He pretty much owned the Colts for the most part when Peyton Manning was there. So it'll be a good debate. I think it'll come down to, do you want the better stats or do you want to see, okay, they matched up against each other, where in the NBA, we didn't see LeBron and Michael Jordan match up against each other, but we have seen Mahomes and Tom Brady match up against each other. And then we didn't see LeBron and Kobe match up in the finals, but we did see LeBron and Steph go head to head. We saw LeBron and Tim Duncan go head to head, and they kind of split in both of those series.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing with the Patrick Mahomes thing that we should consider is Brady had about a 10-year gap between the Super Bowls, and he had made it to a couple but lost a couple. But at the same time, a couple of turnovers. We had the early Patriots era, which was led by their defense. They had Mike Vrabel, Richard Seymour, Ty Law, all these great guys on that team. And then eventually all those guys left, and then they had this 10-year lull where they did have this undefeated season. They did make it to the Super Bowl again with the Giants. When it comes to the Chiefs, I think there's still those question marks where Andy Reid, they've talked about retirement for him.
Yeah.
We've talked about Travis Kelce potentially retiring as well. So those are 2 major figures in that championship run. Will Steve Spagnuolo finally get another opportunity? I think his time in St. Louis wasn't fair. He didn't really have a great quarterback situation. He had Sam Bradford and then a couple other guys. Didn't really pan out. I think maybe that was just where it was at that time. Where does he go?
Yeah.
So I think there is a period where we lose Andy Reid, we lose Steve Spagnuolo, and then how do they adjust to that? I think that they're a good enough team and a smart enough organization to figure that out, but I can't quite anoint them winning 4, 5, 6 Super Bowls because those are questions that they have. Plus, we have a team like the Bengals who seem to be really the only thorn in their side. And then there's other teams. Where will the Texans be? Where will the Bills finally get over that hump? Will the Ravens ever get over that hump? Those are questions that will be answered. I think that we can't quite put them winning the next 3, 4 Super Bowls in a row quite yet, just because there's a lot of things left unknown.
Yeah, not yet, but I think as long as Andy Reid is there, you can pretty much pick them to get to the Super Bowl every year, and I won't have an issue with that. And what I said going in during the regular season was, this is very much Patriots-esque, where the Patriots would have some lulls in the middle of the regular season, but they have a top defense and they have a top quarterback, and Tom Brady had so many years where he never had the best weapons in the league, but as long as he had the ball in his hand at the end of the game, he was able to overcome those deficits. With Patrick Mahomes has been able to do, and they're really only the 2 quarterbacks where if they're down 10, 20 points even with Tom Brady, you're never really sweating. And during this game, I never had a doubt that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to win this game, especially with the 49ers. They had so many opportunities to run away and slam the door and seize the momentum, and they were just never able to quite do it. And you can tell with Patrick Mahomes, he has that fear factor with all of these teams right now, and really the only team that's not afraid of the Chiefs is the Bengals.
Yeah, exactly. And even when they had the lead, they still didn't feel comfortable. And I
Yeah.
feel like it really was only the first quarter where the Niners felt like they had the momentum.
Yeah.
And then even when they had that 10-point lead, it didn't feel comfortable enough because
Yeah.
we've seen him come back from 24 nothing. We've seen him come back from all these big comebacks, especially even in the Super Bowls, all three where he's down 10
Yeah.
at least. So I
I
think
thi
that I never really felt like they had control, even when they had control in that game.
Yeah, and I think another important aspect of this argument is Tom Brady had Bill Belichick, defensive minded coach, did install that hard work ethic, did meet with Tom Brady every single day. And then he was teaching Tom how defenses operate. And then he was able to learn that side of the ball. And Patrick Mahomes can do that with Spagnola. However, when you look at Tom Brady's offensive coordinators, it is the Josh McDaniels of the world, it's the Billy O'Briens of the world, where Patrick Mahomes arguably has the greatest offensive mind ever as his head coach. And you can point to other head coaches, and Andy Reid probably has another Super Bowl or two to go to put himself solidly, like rock solid, as a top 5 head coach of all time. But you can look and you're like, well, Brady didn't have the offensive acumen. He didn't have the weapons that Patrick Mahomes had earlier in his career. And then Andy Reid has played a big part with Patrick Mahomes because he's had the Donovan McNabbs. He made Alex Smith look pretty good. He resurrected Michael Vick. He gave Nick Foles a chance and a fighting chance of having a career, and ultimately led to Nick Foles beating Tom Brady in a Super Bowl. And Andy Reid had his fingerprints all over there, but he had never really had that rock solid superstar quarterback. And then you can point to the same thing with Kyle Shanahan, where Kyle Shanahan, he's had the Jimmy G's of the world. He's had Brock Purdy, who is not on the level of a Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes yet. He's more of the Donovan McNabb, Nick Foles type of quarterback range right here. So it's like with Brady, he never had the offensive, at least brain power on his side that Mahomes has had, where Andy Reid was able to drop a play and get McCole Hardman wide open.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that everything you said there, you kind of nailed. It's like he doesn't have that same firepower there. But I think that for Kyle Shanahan now, as we pivot to the 49ers, as a team that feels like they've blown their opportunity a little bit, we'll go over their free agents in a few minutes. But talking about do you think that this was their opportunity and they lost it? Do you think they can still reclaim another Super Bowl title or at least a Super Bowl appearance at this time? Or do you think that they had their window is closing at this point?
I feel like it's closing at this point, and you can point to Debo Samuel, who grimaced pretty much every time he got up from a big hit. You can point to Christian McCaffrey. How much longer is he actually going to be able to do this at this high of a level where he's that much of a game breaker? And he really wasn't able to break the game open in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you have George Kittle, who got hurt in this game, and then he's starting to get a little bit older. And then Nick Bosa, in this game, he's another year older. You brought in a mercenary like Javon Hargrave, who made a play. Then you have Eric Armstead and all these other guys who need to pay. So it's like, how many times can you keep the morale, keep the fire, and that desire to get back to the Super Bowl after you've lost twice under the same head coach, and then your talent is starting to get a little bit older? So I think they can get back. But for the 49ers, you kind of got a little bit lucky against the Green Bay Packers, where you had some dropped interceptions in that game and another missed kick. And then you had the situation against the Lions where they blew a 24-7 lead. And then you have the Rams, who are kind of coming back up. Sean McVay is kind of finding his team again. Will they get someone like a Derrick Henry this offseason to really bolster up that firepower on offense? Are they going to have another good draft, find a really good tight end, or another Puka Nacua on that team and just revamp the defense? So I think their path is definitely a lot harder, where they don't have that fear factor like the Kansas City Chiefs do. Whereas when you face Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson's like, I hate facing him. I don't want to do it.
Mhm.
And then you have Josh Allen, who kind of shits his pants every single time he plays the Kansas City Chiefs, and there's just some bad juju there. So I think with the 49ers, it's going to be a lot harder for them to get back to a Super Bowl.
I agree, especially when you see the resurgence. You mentioned the Rams. I also see a team like the Lions who are still very much in it. You see a team like, I know the Eagles had a really bad stretch at the end of the season, but will they be back? The Packers seem like they're emerging as a good team as well. The Seahawks, what will they do? The Seahawks are a team that Maybe they get the right quarterback. They have enough players on defense. What will they do? So I think that the 49ers have a harder window. Whereas the Chiefs, we look in their division, the Broncos are a mess. The Chargers have Jim Harbaugh, but what does that really mean? And then the Raiders, where, we have Antonio Pierce. We like what we've seen from him so far, but
Yeah.
it still feels like it's the Chiefs' division to lose, where the 49ers have the Rams up their sleeves. They have the Seahawks there, and then even the Cardinals, who
Yeah.
have somebody who they can get potentially a Marvin Harrison, and they have another person maybe in the draft as well. So
Yeah.
I think that all those teams in that division are on the come up, where maybe AFC West, not so much.
Yeah, AFC West, not so much. And Jim Harbaugh is there, but he still has a lot of retooling to do on that team. And there's some rumors there. I predicted this, that they would move off of Joey Bosa this year. It looks like that might be the case to clear up some cap, but you also have to build Justin Herbert's confidence and turn him into a killer. And it's going to be a lot tougher for a team like the Broncos, Chargers to kind of get that firepower, where the Seahawks had one of the youngest defenses this year. They're pretty much just a quarterback away. Can they get someone like a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix in the draft that is a little bit better than Geno Smith? And then also their run game is kind of coming up, where they have two nice young running backs. And then I think the Cardinals are on a really good trajectory right now. They always give the 49ers a tough time, and Murph from Impractical Jokers has done a great job rebuilding that team, rebuilding Kyler Murray's confidence as well. And then you kind of have the weirdness of Cliff Kingsbury gone, where the first time he went 7-0, his first move was comparing himself to Ted Lasso.
That was weird. That was really weird. The Cardinals, I think that they're going to be in a good place next year. I think they're still probably going to be a year away, even with some of the moves they make. But everyone in that division, I think, is on the uprise, where everyone in the AFC West might be on the decline.
Yeah.
Plus, also, there's questions with the Bills. Is Sean McDermott the head coach? The Ravens, this was their year. Did they lose their opportunity? And then even with someone like the Bengals are probably going to lose T. Higgins this year. So
Yeah.
definitely some questions more in the AFC side of things. I feel like the Chiefs should still always be the favorites. So that's kind of where we can pivot to from there.
Yeah, that's kind of where we can pivot to from there. I think this Super Bowl, it was tough. Did you feel like it was a weird, kind of like a weird vibe in the Super Bowl, where it kind of, I don't know if it's the Las Vegas arena, where it's kind of just like, I don't know. It was a little bit deflated. The first half, it wasn't like the Super Bowl where the Rams and the Bengals felt like a spectacle. Even the Eagles and the Chiefs felt like a spectacle so far as well, like in those games.
Yeah, I felt the same. Like, I felt like there was something missing, and I feel like part of it could be Vegas, because we mentioned it throughout the game. It felt like throughout this whole time, where like it feels like this is too obvious for it to not be the Chiefs.
Yeah.
This makes too much sense for NFL history and what the Vegas might want as well. And then it also felt like the fans there didn't really know what teams they were rooting for. It felt like they were booing both teams at certain points.
Yeah.
And then it just felt like the magic of the Super Bowl, which we usually see, even if it was a team that you see there all the time, like the Patriots or the Chiefs. Even last year, we had the Kelsey Bowl.
Yeah.
The year before that, we saw the Rams and the Bengals, two teams who were trying to get over the hump. Joe Burrow emerging as a superstar, and then obviously Matthew Stafford. I felt like this year there wasn't really any magic. It wasn't quite to the level as usual.
You know who hurt that magic, though? And you know who kind of added to the aura of the Super Bowl kind of being taken down a notch? And I'm not blaming Taylor Swift, because her 90 seconds of screen time. Wow. I'm so offended that Taylor Swift is on screen with Ice Spice and Donald Glover behind her and the entire posse in that booth. But like Tony Romo. Tony Romo, you texted me at one point during this game. You're like, I wish I could hog tie Tony Romo like Red Dead Redemption and drag him through town like Arthur Morgan would. If you played Red Dead Redemption, it's that if you know, you know. But Tony Romo, it seems like the guy just picks a word and he's like, yeah, I'm going to use that word the entire game and then repeat it every single time a play happens. He's like, wow, Brock Purdy, spatial awareness. And then Patrick Mahomes, look at him, recognize the leverage on this team. And then suddenly I'm a defensive coordinator. They should have played man on this team, on this play, even though they did play man on that play. And it's like, Tony Romo is a absolute mess. He had a pretty good first year as a commentator, and it's just been downhill from there. And if we're going to hold players accountable to their performance, we're going to talk about players choking. It's like, can we talk about Tony Romo choking? And then at some points it was even Jim Nantz. He's like, if you're wondering, this isn't a time to kick the field goal. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure we were all wondering that, Jim Nance. Like, we all know that. But, like, it felt like the commentators just added to that aura. And then as soon as I turned the game on and remembered it was on CBS, I was like, oh, God, Tony Romo, Patrick Mahomes. He's just going to be talking about how the 49ers, like, oh, well, are they ready for Patrick Mahomes? And Patrick Mahomes. And I get it with Patty. He does the same thing with Josh Allen, though, but just a poor commentating performance all around. It just made me so excited for Tom Brady. And even with someone like Collinsworth, who gets a lot of grief, it's like at least he has that nice Southern hospitality, that nice Southern charm where he seems like he's enjoying himself. You're a little bit charmed by Chris Collinsworth, where Tony Romo, he's the guy doing the Skechers ad.
Yeah, I've always felt like with Tony Romo, I don't know if it's the way he talks, doing his little "Hey Jim." That's why every time I hear him, he sounds like he's like as if you're starting like a lawnmower or something. And for me, like throughout this entire game, he was just saying nonsense throughout this entire game. And I'm not here to like Tony Romo the person, like say he would about his career or whatever. But as far as an announcer, I felt like he didn't come in prepared either, because I felt like between them calling out play calls that were complete nonsense, whether it was stating the obvious, like, hey, they're down by 10 points, they don't want a field goal, shit like that, like just making the most awkward play calls. I wasn't a fan of what I saw from Tony Romo. Tony Romo of them all, definitely not my favorite. I think Collinsworth, he has a little bit of corniness, but it's almost like it's like heartwarming in a way, because he's so iconic. Collinsworth has been there for forever. And then obviously we have like the Greg Olsons of the world, who I think is fantastic. You have Al Michaels, his resume speaks for himself. And then for Tony Romo, I think the problem and his thing that he's often criticized of, and same with Collinsworth, is the glaze. And with Patrick Mahomes, it's kind of hard not to. He did make some great plays, but Tony Romo takes it to a level where it makes you hate the player almost. Yeah. And he does the same thing with Josh Allen. And I love Josh Allen as well. And I think that, like, you want to glaze the great players, that's fine, but tone it down. Like, at the end of the day, you are an announcer. You're supposed to be impartial, and it just gets really disgraceful at certain points. And I think that this announcement job, we talk about the hollow feeling of this Super Bowl, and I feel like he's part to blame.
Yeah, he's definitely part to blame, and it seems like he's living his career through Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. Like, he's like, yeah, he like has some revisionist history where it's like, I was this type of player too. And he's almost living his career moments that he never had through the great players that are playing in the NFL right now. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of a hollow feeling with Tony Romo. And the Super Bowl was kind of a massive letdown. And it's kind of disappointing when every time you turn it on, you're like bummed out by the commentators.
Yeah, I agree. And then the Taylor Swift lore, which it gets annoying every once in a while, but I think a lot of people were doing the drinking game. Every time Taylor Swift came on, they'd take a shot. There was a lot of people who were blacked out by the end of this game.
Yeah.
And then the last part of it was the halftime show. And now I've actually seen Usher live for free.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Where?
In Connecticut. I got a free ticket, so I went with Andrew back in the day. Was he
at Foxwoods?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was at Foxwoods, and I actually got to see him for free probably about a decade ago. And he had a good show. Like, I mean, he's not my favorite artist, but I'm not against R&B. I like some of his songs, so I was expecting it to be like good, fine, good. You know, it's like he's not particularly my favorite artist, but either way, like you saw some other guys in the past who maybe I'm not a big fan of who still had a good halftime show. Maroon 5 was fine. Coldplay, who I historically hate, they were fine. Like the halftime shows, you know what to expect. It's a lot of a spectacle. It's all about the advertising and whatnot. But this halftime show, even when he was playing songs I enjoyed, I just felt like it was just mid.
Yeah.
Just completely average, maybe below average.
Yeah, I don't know if his like vocal cords like took a little bit to warm up, but like when he first started singing, I was like, well, at least you can tell that he's singing live, and it wasn't particularly a good thing. And my problem and my biggest like the thing that annoys me the most with the Super Bowl halftime show is it feels like they pick artists that are always 10 to 15 years past their peak of popularity. It's like the best one that held up the most was easily the Dr. Dre show, where he brought 50 Cent, Eminem, and you had all of those classic rappers show up. I believe Snoop Dogg showed up on that show as well. And like, that's a fine show, and those artists hold up. You had The Weeknd, who's kind of still in his prime. That's one example, really, but like like then it's the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then they're making fun of the Super Bowl because they won't let them plug their instruments in, and they're playing air guitar. And then you had Bruno Mars there, who is kind of in his peak, but they'll like invite an artist that's still popular, and then they'll pick an artist that's like 5, 10, 15 years past their popularity. It's like, okay, so in 20 years, are you going to ask Travis Scott to do the Super Bowl? Are we going to get Post Malone to do the Super Bowl when he's 60? Is Luke Bryan or some like a country artist going to be here in like 2060 when everyone forgets who they are? Because when they said Usher was doing the Super Bowl, I'm like, Usher? Oh, I mean, he was popular in the 2000s, but 2024? I don't know if that's really the best pick for the Super Bowl. Why can't we ever get anyone who's, I don't know, relevant?
Yeah, because with Usher, the whole time he is playing, like he's playing songs like My Boo, he's playing OMG, he's playing Yeah. Like these songs came out in 2004.
Yeah.
I was 6, and you were like what, 4 when that came out?
2004? Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Maybe 3.
the whole time while he's playing, I'm like, this would have been so sick in 2009 while he's playing. And this isn't even a knock on Usher himself. I'm just like, I think this is more of a critical point about the NFL.
Yeah.
Because you look at all these other guys, even last year when they had Rihanna. Rihanna's another person. She hasn't really been in the spotlight the last several years. She had a baby. She's with ASAP. She's still 5, 6, 7 years away, removed from being at the top of her prime, and she's still like kind of coming to come back at that point. So like, I think when they look at the halftime show next year, look for somebody who's like relevant, somebody whose songs like maybe they charted in the last, I don't know, 3 years or so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't a fan of the halftime show, and I know a lot of people were a fan, but I wasn't.
Yeah, and like you had better artists in the booth watching the Super Bowl. Like you had Post Malone there. Like Post Malone is still relevant. He still released the #1 album last year, I believe. His album went #1. You had Jay-Z watching it, and he's someone who hasn't been relevant, at least in music, for a little bit. I don't think he's been dropping too many albums, but like you could have had him come down. Killer Mike just won the Grammys. How awesome would it be to have Killer Mike, who just won who won 3 Grammys, and then you could have had like a DJ Paul, Killer Mike, Run the Jewels, and 3 6 Mafia Super Bowl. Like 3 6 Mafia hasn't been around for a little bit, but you could have had them come up and do a performance.
Yeah, I think that I would have loved to see Run the Jewels because I think they're still popular enough where people would really enjoy them.
Yeah.
And I think they're also to that level that Usher's in, where they also won a few Grammys when Run the Jewels released Run the Jewels 4. So they're still prominent. They still won a lot of awards, and Killer Mike obviously just won Rap Album of the Year, which was very controversial to some. Not me, not you, but to some.
If you actually listen to the album, you would be like, oh yeah, that actually was the best album that year. The only one you could argue was I just listened to Nas' album that he released that year. That was actually a really solid album. But yeah, that would have been a better performance because I don't know if they hosted the Grammys in Vegas or was it in LA?
I'm not entirely. I think it was in LA this time.
Probably, yeah.
But I don't know. I think they need to work on the halftime show. The Weeknd was great. Dr. Dre was great. Let's bring back, if you're going to bring back an old figure, make it like nostalgic. Bring out Outkast. Bring out, whoever else it might be, but they got to improve it.
Yeah, maybe can we do like a Kendrick and Cole halftime show? That would be cool.
Yeah, or dare, if you want to get really risky, have Kanye in there.
Have Kanye in there. I don't think
that'll ever happen.
Yeah, I don't think the Illuminati would let that happen. The people pulling the strings behind the scenes, but maybe that would be a cool show. He's released probably 4 or 5 of the most iconic albums, and he literally changed the sound of music every time he released an album in hip hop. The entire genre would evolve a little bit.
Yeah, so I think definitely he's got the categories there. But as we're talking about the Super Bowl, the sad part of the NFL season is that it is over, and now we have this long stretch of time, about 6 months, without any football. All we have is the offseason, the draft, and a few other things to look forward to. We can look at where teams are, what their cap space might look like. We'll do a deeper dive next week, but talking about at least the 49ers, the Chiefs, like who they have to fill, what their salary cap looks like, what their draft picks might look like, and kind of diving into the big picture as we have the next 6 months of nothing. All we'll have is basketball, baseball, and hockey, but we all know nobody watches hockey.
Yeah, Canada watches hockey.
Canada does.
Yeah, but we did have the NFL awards go down.
That's right.
Yeah, those were also very controversial where it felt like no one who should have won actually won the award except for maybe Joe Flacco and Myles Garrett. But I know people were upset about Joe Flacco winning because they're like, what? You can die, come back and play, but you're not going to win comeback player of the year. And I know you and I were like, well, if you want to win comeback player of the year, you should actually come back and then play for a majority of the game. So I didn't have a problem with Joe Flacco winning. I thought that was a good choice.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. You want to talk about like all the other guys like Tua, Matt Stafford, Baker Mayfield. These guys weren't really coming back from anything significant. Joe Flacco was retired and then he came back and he played the best football he played his entire career at certain points. Would have had 50 touchdowns if he played a full 17 games. So I'm perfectly fine with Joe Flacco making it and winning it. And I don't really understand the beef there by any means.
Yeah, I don't really understand the beef there either. The weird one was Lamar Jackson was one vote away from being a unanimous MVP. And I think that one vote was Stephen A. Smith, and he voted for Josh Allen. I don't know if that's confirmed, but there are some rumors about that. But for me, Lamar Jackson, he didn't have the best stats, and then he had one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. And you can point to the Steelers game where he threw an interception, could have lost his team that game. I don't really have a problem with him winning it, but to almost be a unanimous MVP where there wasn't really a clear winner, where Lamar Jackson was just the one who had the least amount of bad games throughout the season, where I
Yeah.
thought, if any year for a non-quarterback to win, it would have been this year when he could have given it to someone like a Christian McCaffrey who had 21 total touchdowns and there's only 17 games.
Mhm.
And then it seemed like he had the biggest impact on his team there. I don't have a problem with Lamar winning it, but almost being a unanimous MVP seemed like a little bit of overkill.
Yeah, I agree because I have no problem with him winning it, like as everything you mentioned. But at the same time, he's the first quarterback in NFL history to be like not top five in the big categories, touchdowns, yards, and everything else. So his numbers really weren't that spectacular. And even like you look to his rushing numbers were kind of run of the mill for Lamar Jackson standards. And I don't even think this was his best season. I think even last year he might have been even a little better before he got hurt. So I mean, I'm fine with him winning. 2-time MVP. He's deserving. He's great. We know that. But like you look at a season with Christian McCaffrey, we look at Tyreek Hill and all these other figures who had great seasons but were non-quarterbacks. Hell, even you could have had a TJ Watt in there or a Myles Garrett who could have been up for MVP. I just felt like the media all year was flip-flopping on the MVP. Who's the MVP? Is it Dak Prescott? Is it Defensive Player of the Year Deron Bland? Is it all these other players? Tua in the conversation at certain points. Brock Purdy. And then for it to be at this point how they voted for it, not fine with him winning, but like almost unanimous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, almost unanimous. And it felt like a year where it's like no one was really the runaway MVP. So the fact that he was almost unanimous was a little bit like, okay, he only had 24 touchdowns though.
Yeah, and he also had I think 15 turnovers as well.
Yeah, I don't know if he had exactly 15 turnovers, but he wasn't like he was a little bit loose with the ball in some of these games. And you also had one of the best defenses in the league, if not the best, with the Ravens, and they held the Chiefs to 17 points in their game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that team all around him was fantastic. So I don't know, not a problem with him winning MVP, but I also had a problem with the Defensive Player of the Year. I'm totally fine with Myles Garrett winning. I think maybe you could have gone TJ Watt. Maybe you could have gone Max Crosby. I know the show has joked Defensive Player of the Year Deron Bland, but fine with Myles Garrett winning. But I didn't appreciate the blowback because he's been great. And then now Micah Parsons is chirping about the Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, Micah Parsons is always chirping though, and I don't have a problem with players having a podcast, but when you use it as an outlet and you're kind of just tearing other players down, and it's not even like a controversial type of way, and I don't know if he's trying to be controversial, but it more just comes across as him being either out of touch or dumb. Whether it's him
Or even a hater.
Yeah, or a hater, whether it's him saying that he has seen everything when he's only played 3 years in the NFL, that kind of raises an eyebrow. And especially when you are a player of that caliber, you need to be looking for ways to improve. You need to have the Tom Brady aspect where at 35, 38, Tom Brady is like, yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still getting better every single day. Where Micah Parsons is just like, yeah, no, it's been 3 years, man. I think I've seen everything. Or you have the 49ers game earlier this year where they go 42-10 on you, and then Micah Parsons was like, oh well, I didn't think it'd be that personal, but if you want to make it personal, we can make it personal, but I really don't think we're like 42-10 away from the 49ers. You're like, right, you're not. You are 48-16 away from the Green Bay Packers. And then he goes and he's like, TJ Watt tweets after the game. He's like, yeah, whatever. Nothing I haven't dealt with before from being snubbed, because he led the league in sacks. But Micah Parsons goes on his podcast to say, not only do I not think TJ Watt, you shouldn't have been Defensive Player of the Year, I don't think you're a top 5 rusher in the league. And then he goes on this tangent and he's like, obviously number 1 is me. Like, no, you're not the best pass rusher in the league. You're not on the same level as Aaron Donald. You're not on the same level of TJ Watt. TJ Watt had more sacks than you. TJ Watt has had 3 years in the NFL where he's led the league in sacks. Has Micah Parsons ever led the league in sacks in his career?
He's not.
He hasn't led the league in sacks in his career. And then he's saying, Nick Bosa, as much as I love Nick Bosa is not on the same level as a TJ Watt. And then Myles Garrett and TJ Watt are the de facto best defensive players in the league right now. And really what it comes down to is who led the league in sacks. It doesn't matter how many times he was double teamed. It doesn't matter how much Alex Highsmith was double teamed, which is something he brought up in his podcast. It matters who had the most sacks when it comes down to. That's really the key indicator on who the best pass rusher is. And TJ Watt has done that not once, not twice, but 3 times now. And you're not saying he's the best pass rusher in the league when he can arguably be one of the best pass rushers in NFL history. And he's already better than his older brother, JJ Watt.
Yeah, and you look at the numbers to the first 100 games, too. He's breaking all these different records. I think he has the most sacks by anybody in the first 100 games. Him and Myles Garrett are neck and neck there, but you want to talk about a person who completely changes their team when he's not there. Look at their record with and without him and how different it is. And that's including, like, not really different offensive schemes either. So we talk about his value to the Steelers and how much they mean. Saw how much they missed him in that Bills playoff game that they had earlier this year. And then everything else, like the way he's led the league in sacks, the way he's impacted that defense, like, you want to say that he's not the best top 5 pass rusher, you want to put yourself there? Sure. Confidence, whatever. I don't care. But to say he's not a top 5 pass rusher, that's, to me, feels personal. And that feels like a personal jab at that point. Because TJ Watt, since he's come into the league, he's consistently wreaked havoc on everybody. You have to plan for TJ Watt specifically because of the shit that he can do. Whether it's touchdowns, whether it's forced fumbles, interceptions, sacks, he's all over the field at any point in the game.
Yeah, it's all over the field at any point in the game, and the Steelers have a losing record without him. And then with him, they're a above average team in the NFL this year. And the fact that he always shows up when the game matters the most, where it comes down to it, it always comes down to a TJ Watt batted pass. It's coming down to him getting an interception. It's coming down to him getting a strip sack, where Micah Parsons, when it comes down to it, you've played 4 playoff games and you've gotten 1 sack. You're not the best pass rusher in the league if that's the case. You're not on the same level as Bosa, Donald, TJ Watt, or Myles Garrett, and it's
Max Crosby too.
Yeah, or Max Crosby, who plays pretty much every snap, and the amount of snaps he played compared to everyone else in the league was absolutely unheard of this year, where Max Crosby has taken his workout regimen seriously, and the way he's dedicated himself to being the best player he can be. For someone who was a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick coming out of Michigan, no one really believed in him, and then he transformed himself to not only one of the best players in the league, but someone who could change the entire focus and mentality of a franchise and say, hey, if you don't want Antonio Pierce on this team, I don't want to be a part of this Raiders culture. And he's doing that for the betterment of the Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw how great the Raiders defense was that second half of the season. Once when Josh McDaniels left the building, their defense was top 5 in the league at one point statistically after he had taken over the helm. So, and I think a lot of that goes to Max Crosby. So I honestly think whether it's Myles Garrett, whether it's TJ Watt or Max Crosby, any of those 3 guys, I think that those guys, I think, were the clear winners for the Defensive Player of the Year. And I was okay with any of those 3. Didn't have I didn't understand why Deron Bland was there.
Yeah.
We've made jokes about that many times. And Micah Parsons, I feel like, is there because he's a Cowboy. If he's not a Cowboy, where does he fall in that ranking? Still think he's very talented. Still think he's great. Super athletic, of course. But I think that, I don't know. I don't like what he's doing there. And it kind of comes to his maturity level at that point. And that's my biggest issue with Micah Parsons. I think he's obviously one of the most talented pass rushers in the league, but I feel like he hasn't quite gotten to that mature level that you have with TJ Watt, not quite the leader that you have with Myles Garrett either. And even Max Crosby is to that same point. Like the issue that I have with Mike Parsons is his maturity level. He's got to mature if he's going to be great.
Yeah, especially it's just having the self-awareness to always be learning, always be seeing something. And not only that, but just having that dog in you where you're taking those games personally and you're taking the vendetta against a quarterback personal, like you're competing. And it comes down to it's a one-on-one sport. It's not, it's like NFL is a team sport, but when it's you versus the pass rusher, it should be personal. And you shouldn't be surprised when the 49ers have that extra edge when they play against you, or any team does, because hey, you are America's team. The media hypes you up every single year. And outside of the Super Bowl team that wins, everyone wants to give the Cowboys the best shot because you guys are always on prime time. You guys are always overhyped. You haven't won since you've been on VHS tapes, and you still get hyped up as a potential favorite year in and year out when you guys haven't even made it past the second round. And Brock Purdy's already made it to a Super Bowl. Nick Bosa's got to a Super Bowl twice.
Yeah, exactly. And then also talking about that rivalry specifically, that's one of the biggest rivalries in NFL history. You're talking about the 80s history, you're talking about the 90s history, you're talking about all the history that we've had up in even the last 2 decades that we've been able to witness, whether it's playoff matchups where they get annihilated. That's one of the biggest rivalries in football. There's always going to be animosity there.
Yeah, there should always be animosity there. And it's like one of those rivalries, as bad as either team is, it's still going to be one of the most historic games. It's like when the Steelers and the Ravens play each other. At this point, it's going to be like when the Bills and the Patriots match up against each other. Any of those key matchups, it's like, yeah, you should be taking it personally and have that extra fire and wake up when you're going to get ready for those games. So kind of weird that he went on this massive tangent against TJ Watt when all he's done has been perennially a top 5 defensive player in the league.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and then any other awards you want to go over from here? Or do you think everyone else, like CJ Stroud, like obviously he should have been rookie of the year? I thought it was a little bit weird, like Puka Nacua breaks every single record at his position for a rookie and doesn't really get any consideration to be offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, I think the voting wise, I believe a majority of them went to CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud's deserving, especially with how he turned around the Texans. But I think Puka Nacua should have been right there as well. Hell, you can even give a vote to some of those Lions guys too. But I think that it was between Puka and CJ Stroud. Totally fine with CJ Stroud winning it, but I think Puka deserves some more love than he got.
Yeah, Puka definitely deserves some more love. And then the coach of the year, I have no problem with Kevin Stefanski winning. I thought Dan Campbell should have gotten more recognition than he had just with how bad the Lions have been. And he literally had the greatest season in franchise history. And that was the reason why Kevin Stefanski got it the first time with the Browns. But the fact that he went through 4 quarterbacks and was able to bring this team to the playoffs, the first team to make the playoffs with having 4 different starting quarterbacks, definitely a master coaching job with Stefanski, but it was kind of a letdown in the playoffs.
Yeah, I've just for them like all the injuries that they had, all the bullshit with Deshaun Watson and the quarterback situation and Nick Chubb going down. I'm fine with him winning. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they do the voting right after the regular season. They don't account for the playoffs, which I think they should, because I don't know if Lamar would have been a unanimous MVP. But I think that Kevin Stefanski is totally fine. I think you could have shouted out Dan Campbell, D'Amico Ryans, for any of those guys and the success that they had.
Yeah, he definitely could have shouted out any of those guys here, but NFL awards, very controversial, similar to the Grammys, but I think they got most of them right. I don't mind Lamar winning, but definitely shouldn't have been an almost unanimous MVP on that end there. But you look at going into the future with the San Francisco 49ers, got a lot of free agents, and then you're paying a lot of guys, and you're pretty close up against the salary cap here when you're not even paying Brock Purdy yet. And after that game, Did that kind of give you the feel where Kyle Shanahan may look elsewhere for another quarterback, just with kind of how the game went and ended?
I think that you should explore all your options, but I think that when you have Brock Purdy making $500,000, I think it's going to be hard for them to move off of him, especially because McCaffrey's the highest paid, Kittle's one of the highest paid, Debo, all these guys that they're paying. I'm like I don't know how they can even afford to get another guy at that point.
Yeah, you can't really. And then cap space wise, they are ranked 21st overall, and they have 273,000 of available cap space here. And then you just sign Javon Hargrave to a massive deal there, and then you have Brandon Allen. Okay, that doesn't really matter. You can let him walk. And then you have Owen Burks, who's a linebacker. He's been pretty good, but you can definitely find a replacement for him.
Probably in the draft.
Sam Darnold, and then Ross Dwelly, who's a tight end. But then you have John Feliciano, who's a really good guard for you. He's probably someone who you want to retain. And then you have Kevin Gibbons. And then once you get into the secondary, you have Deshaun Gibson, who's going to be a pretty big piece going forward. You want to keep him on your secondary. So he's someone who may leave. And then Jawan Jennings is a player who's been pretty important for you. And with Debo, kind of having some injury issues the past few years, someone's probably going to give him more money than you're going to want to pay him and make him a legitimate two in this league. I could see him leaving.
Absolutely.
And then Ray McLeod, you can let him walk. He pretty much lost the Super Bowl by not falling on that ball for you. But then you have Matt Pryor, offensive lineman, and then Chase Young, who's probably also going to leave for you. So it's not like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, Trey Greenlaw, and Diamador Lenore are all going to leave, but these are some pretty big pieces. Could definitely replace them in the draft. Do you see them struggling in free agency at all, or do you think they'll be able to bounce back from that?
I think that the big thing for me is losing some of their offensive linemen because I think what makes the 49ers so great has been their running game and giving time for Brock Purdy to make these throws. But if they lose some players and like offensive linemen, it's going to be hard. And then I think their defense will take a step back because Chase Young really came in there, and although he wasn't magnificent like what you would want him to be, I think he still elevated the game of Nick Bosa and some of these other guys that were there, and he gave he added their pressure a little bit there as well. So I think that they'll take a step back defensively, and then I think their offensive line will take a step back, which could hurt their offense in the long run.
Yeah, and not as many big name free agents for them, but the Chiefs definitely have some big name guys who may leave. Specifically on the defensive side, number one, L'Jarius Sneed. That would be a massive loss if he leaves. Do you think they'd be able to retain him?
I think that they should want to, absolutely, because he's pretty young too, and I think that if he likes winning, I think that this is his best place for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you have Chris Jones. That deal's kind of looming on them now, and is Travis Kelce coming back next year? And are you going to be able to give Chris Jones that massive long-term deal that he deserves? Because he definitely showed in the Super Bowl that outside of Patrick Mahomes, he is the most valuable player on defense, and maybe in the league, he's one of the most underrated defensive players where you have people talking about Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Aaron Donald still even, and TJ Watt. But all Chris Jones does is make massive, big plays in clutch time when it matters in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that ultimately, inevitably, he is going to walk in free agency. I can see him maybe going to the NFC. Maybe it's a team like the Packers who finally opens up their wallets. Maybe it's a Detroit team, or maybe it's a team like the Seahawks who have a little bit of cap space. Maybe they take that opportunity to bolster that defense. I think wherever he goes, though, he's going to make that defense 10 times better.
I mean, there's a team in the AFC, though, fourth in cap space. Already had a really good defense this year. No state income tax, so you can maybe get a little bit of a deal there. But how about the Texans signing Chris Jones?
The Texans would be great. Picture him with Will Anderson. That would be disgusting. I'm here for that.
Already a monster defensive line. And then you have Mike Dana, defensive end. You still have Amenahue, still have George Karlaftis, some good guys who are pass rushers there. So not a massive loss. But then you have a big playmaker like Willie Gay.
Okay.
He's been able to make some plays for you there. But a lot of big players on your defense. Then it's some of your running backs, you may lose some depth there, but easily guys you can replace like Drew Tranquill. But you also have Mike Edwards on defense, who is a massive piece. Your left tackle, Donovan Smith, is a free agent, and pretty much outside of that, it's like Deion Bush, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who just let him walk. Like him and Kadarius Toney are someone who you need to get off of this team.
Yeah, 100%. He'll be a great San Antonio Stampede someday.
Great San Antonio Stampede one day, but I think overall the Chiefs have more big name free agents that they could potentially lose this year, especially with how much you're starting to pay Patrick Mahomes. And it'll be if he will restructure that deal to make room for someone like Chris Jones.
Yeah, I trust the Chiefs because like they had some questions a couple of years ago. How are they going to replace Honey Badger? And they did come in and find a solid replacement for him. Now with Chris Jones, he's a lot bigger piece to fill because I know that Honey Badger was kind of he had been at his peak and he was starting to decline a little bit. But losing someone like if you potentially lose Chris Jones, Willie Gay, these true tranquils of the world, and then some other figures like that's going to be a big loss to their defense. And their defense was ultimately what elevated them throughout the season when their offense was struggling. So that's a big concern for me for the Chiefs. But I think I trust their process by making it happen somehow.
Yeah, and they've been able to replace guys in the draft. Like they've lost pass rushers before, then in comes someone like George Karlaftis making a huge impact in this Super Bowl.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think ultimately it'll come down to coaching. But overall, we can go through quickly some other teams, and we have an article from Pro Football Focus. We'll give our opinion on each team, which the top free agent this year that they should target. And at number one is Brian Burns with the Arizona Cardinals,
Yeah.
coming out of Tepperville, if you want to call it that, with Panthers. Throwing drinks on people. I think Brian Burns would be a massive addition for the Arizona Cardinals, and their defense showed signs of becoming better. I think that would be a piece that could put them over the top in a tough NFC conference, especially if you can add a Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that could be kind of reminiscent of like when they got TJ Watt, how much better that defense got after the fact when they had some nice pieces there. So I like that there.
Yeah, and then we have the Atlanta Falcons. They have Zadarius Smith as a edge rusher that they should target this year. They weren't able to generate too much pressure off of the edge, so I think that could be a pretty good defensive target, but I think you still need something a little bit more for Atlanta just to shore up that defense.
Yeah, 100%. They should try to go after one of the top edge rushers in the draft too. And then maybe even get L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, and then it has the Ravens keeping Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know if that's a huge ask for the Ravens, and he may demand a little bit more money in free agency or even potentially go somewhere that gives him a better chance to win a Super Bowl. But keeping Odell would be important, but I think you should look elsewhere because him staying healthy as of late is just not the norm.
I think that you should also maybe address it in the draft too. The Ravens the last couple of years haven't been the greatest with the draft, but at the same time, like Odell has had his injuries. He had a great season this year, but I also think that you can probably find his replacement for cheaper because they paid him $15 million. And I remember when he signed, we didn't like that contract, and
Yeah.
it panned out to some extent. But you can get somebody cheaper who's probably similar skill set.
Yeah, and then after that, the Bills have the addressing some pass rushers, nothing too big there, but Carolina Panthers going out there targeting Calvin Ridley. I could see that. It looks like the Jaguars may target a receiver in the draft this year. Calvin Ridley didn't really work out the way he wanted to. Could you see the Panthers being a stupid team, being a team that's below average, being a team that we've labeled as the modern day Browns, paying someone like Calvin Ridley way too much money?
Yes. And I would be surprised if they didn't. And if it's not Calvin Ridley, maybe it's a Gabe Davis. Maybe it's another free agency
Or
looming out
both.
there. Or maybe they pay Jawan Jennings a bunch of money and he might be more deserving. But Calvin Ridley, Panthers, I can see it now.
Yeah, and then the Chicago Bears going out there, shoring up their secondary with someone like Jalen Johnson. They had a really good pass rush, but they did struggle against the Packers' offensive scheme this year when they matched up against them. I could see that being a great fit for them too.
Yeah, I think so. And their defense played well down the stretch.
Yeah, and then the Bengals, they have them getting Dalton Schultz. Not in love with that. The
Mhm.
Bengals are a team, they've been able to plug and play some pretty average tight ends, whether it's someone like Hayden Hurst, who they had there previously, or they had Drew Sample this year. I think that's someone where let's go in the draft. I mean, we saw what happened with Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave this year. Go out there, get someone really dynamic if you're going to lose someone like T. Higgins at the tight end position, not Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, there's a lot of good draft. I mean, I doubt they'll get Brock Bowers, but there's definitely great tight ends in this draft. I would go cheaper there, honestly.
Yeah, and then they have Cleveland going after Hollywood Brown. Um,
Uh,
I would want to keep him if I'm the Arizona Cardinals. He's been a really good receiver. Him and Kyler Murray have some chemistry. I wouldn't want to break that up. And then the Browns, I know you're probably going to lose some talent at wide receiver this year, but I just don't see him being a great fit in Cleveland. And I think him being in somewhere like Arizona that's in a dorm or just a dome or warmer weather, I think that's a better fit for him.
yeah, I think so too. I think the Browns. I don't know if you're gonna sign Hollywood Brown, you might as well keep Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, right? And
Right.
that's my opinion.
Yeah, and then they have the Dallas Cowboys going after Grover Stewart, who is a good run stopper for the Green Bay Packers this year. Um, I could see that being a good fit. Is it going to change Dallas's world? I don't think so. I think they should look to the draft to fix their defensive line issues.
Yeah, I think so too. They did just hire Mike Zimmer as DC. Finalized. No sexy Rexy reunion apparently.
Yeah, I think you should have gone after Sexy Rexy, but Mike Zimmer, I don't know if he's going to be as well received. And he's kind of another old head where you kind of have Mike McCarthy, Mike Zimmer, and it's like how the Clippers now are like the greatest hits of the 2010s. We'll see how that pans out for them, but I don't know if bringing in Mike Zimmer is the answer if you're the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I feel like he's at the same level as Dan Quinn. It's an inoffensive hire, but I don't know if it's going to change their world.
Yeah, and then it has the Denver Broncos going after Kendall Fuller this year, fixing some of their secondary issues. You already have another good corner, so bringing in someone who's a veteran. He's 29 years old, so you still have some youth there. Could potentially be a good fit with someone like Sean Payton, who historically likes having 2 to 4 really good corners on his team. But he's also been good at drafting them in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think that draft Kendall Fuller maybe on a shorter term contract and then draft somebody to be his replacement.
Yeah, and then I really like this one. Detroit Lions going after Justin Metabike, who is an absolute beast in the middle for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think this one's a really good point. I think this could really shore up the middle of that defense, stop the run. It could be the answer against a Christian McCaffrey or a LA Rams run game that was really able to blow them up, or against someone like the Bears who have been able to run the ball well against them.
Yeah, or even the Packers too. I think the Lions definitely need somebody on the defensive line because you have Hutchinson, who's been doing great there, but outside of him, like you can't really rely on any of the other guys. Aleem McNeil was good for them, but you get somebody there who's a veteran, who's a good run stopper. I think that'll be beneficial.
Yeah, and then you have the Green Bay Packers going after safety Geno Stone. He played really well this year. This is mostly if Darnell Savage, after he changed his name to 21 Savage, really wasn't the same. And then it's can he recover from that dropped interception that could have cost them the game against the 49ers? I think that would be a really good pickup in their secondary.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the Texans has them going after Blake Cashman. He's kind of a Patrick Queen type of player. I think that would be another really good addition at the linebacker position to go with Will Anderson.
Yeah, I think their defense is nice, but I think they should go after wide receiver. That should be their priority.
Yeah, and then it has the Colts re-signing Michael Pittman. Definitely something you should do.
Yeah.
Michael Pittman kind of had a breakout year this year, where before we're like, is he a one? And then this year's like, oh, okay, Michael Pittman is definitely a one.
Yeah, and they have so much cap space that they never seem to use for some reason. So sign them. Why
Yeah.
not?
And then this one, Jacksonville Jaguars going after T. Higgins, kind of getting over that Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley didn't really work out for them. So if you go after someone in the draft or T. Higgins, when Jamar Chase was out a couple of years ago, was a top 5 receiver when he was off the field statistically through that stretch. So I think that would be a really good fit for Trevor. And you can go back and watch some highlight reels of Trevor Lawrence just hitting guys in the hands, and they would either step out of bounds or just make a play that was slightly off step. So I think T. Higgins would definitely be an upgrade over Calvin Ridley.
Oh yeah, I like that too, and I think T Higgins likes that too, being in the warm sun.
And being in the warm sun, yeah. And then Kansas City going after Chris Jones and re-signing him. That's definitely the biggest piece that they need to resign outside of L'Jarius Sneed. So definitely on board with that. Definitely something they should make happen.
Absolutely.
And then the Raiders have them going after edge rusher Josh Uche. He's been pretty
Yeah.
good. They ask a lot of Max Crosby, so I think just getting another edge to go pair to pair with him, that could definitely be something that helps them a lot.
Yeah, Josh Uchi's a really nice player, and I mean, really liked bringing in a lot of the old Patriots players, and why not bring another guy in there after they brought in Jacoby Myers and pretty much every other former Patriot, it felt like.
Yeah. And then it has the Chargers going after Jacoby Awuzie. I think shoring up that secondary that's been very overrated the past few years. Can't imagine how many times I've had people say, no, the Chargers defense is actually really good. And then they go out there and get cooked. I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for them to be good. And they just haven't been.
Yeah, I agree. I think I trust Jim Harbaugh to build something good for them there, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah. And then they have the Rams going after Jadeveon Clowney. That could be a solid replacement for Chase Young. He was pretty good with the Ravens. And if you don't have as much cap space, he could be an okay fit, but he's not changing your world.
You said that for the Rams?
Yeah, for the Rams, they have Jadeveon Clowney.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I feel like how he played this year was uncharacteristic from the past. I don't know.
Yeah. And then you have the Dolphins re-signing Andre James. I think that could be a good fit for them. Get another center, but really the Dolphins have to worry about their quarterback position and getting a replacement for Tua.
Yeah, I agree. They're not going to go anywhere otherwise.
Then we have the Vikings with re-signing Kirk Cousins. I know a lot of people have said the Patriots want to re-sign him, but I'm fine with them going after Kirk Cousins, just keeping him on that team because he had a pretty good thing going with him this year. So let's give him one more chance, draft a quarterback this year, and see where their coach can take you.
Yeah, I think Kirk is going to get a lot of suitors here, though, because I think he's probably the most attractive quarterback free agent at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely the most attractive. And I know the original plan for the 49ers before Jimmy G was available was Kirk Cousins. So that could definitely be a viable option there.
Yeah, they passed on Patrick Mahomes because of it.
They did pass on Patrick Mahomes because of it. What a whiff. Imagine Patrick Mahomes on the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan.
Ridiculous.
And then the New Orleans Saints going after Kenny Moore, just that corner. They did lose one of their corners to the Ravens last year, so it could definitely shore up that secondary. But you have a lot more issues to deal with than that. You have Derek Carr, you're handicapped in your salary cap, and as Ted said from the famous movie Ted, you got a lot of problems, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. I think the Saints should be worried if they can keep all 53 players on their roster.
And then the New York Giants, Curtis Samuel. No, he's not changing your world. Move on from Daniel Jones. That is an addition by subtraction. That is the most important thing to do this year. Find someone dumb enough to take Daniel Jones, whether that is the Panthers, whether that's the New Orleans Saints, whether that's the Jets if Aaron Rodgers decides to retire out of nowhere. Just get rid of Daniel Jones and you'll be a better team because of it.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel. How does that move the needle? They go from being the worst receiving corps to the second worst receiving corps. Come on.
Yeah, you're slightly better than the Panthers. Congrats.
Congratulations.
And then also the New York Jets going after Jermaine Luminor. He's an offensive lineman. You definitely need to protect Aaron Rodgers here. Re-sign someone on the offensive line, but you need to reboot that whole unit. It's one of the weakest units in the NFL this year.
Yeah, they need all the help they can get. That offensive line is actually ass.
Yeah, and then it has Philadelphia going after L'Jarius Sneed. We mentioned him with the Chiefs,
Yeah.
but another team, kind of an aging secondary, needs to retool a unit. Definitely L'Jarius Sneed would be someone at the top of my list if I'm Philadelphia. I like
Yeah.
that pick here.
I like that a lot.
And then the Steelers at QB going after Baker Mayfield to replace Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an upgrade because Kenny Pickett fucking sucks. Yeah, we'll take Baker Mayfield. That'd be good. And he'd be pretty cheap too for them. I think they should do that.
Yeah, I think Baker Mayfield would definitely make them better. Does he want to go play with Arthur Smith? Probably not, but I think that would definitely be an upgrade. You'd still have the worst quarterback in your division, but it's at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, but does Baker want to play in Florida or Pittsburgh? That is a question he'll have to decide for himself.
And then after that, we have San Francisco going after Steven Nelson at cornerback. I think that would be fine there. Definitely have to retain someone in your secondary, but a boost at corner, keeping someone on your team, I think that would definitely help.
Mhm.
And then Seattle re-signing Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
No problem with that.
Yeah, he played great this year.
And then Tampa re-signing Antoine Winfield Jr. Think he was one of the best defensive players this year. He got snubbed from the Pro Bowl, but Eli Manning ended up picking him to come on his team, helped him win the Pro Bowl again against Peyton Manning this year. Definitely the most important re-sign for the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah, outside of Baker.
And then to round it off, Tennessee going after Chase Young. No,
Chase Young, don't go to Tennessee.
it's not going to change your world. And then finally, we have Washington Commanders going after Kermaine Curl, re-signing him.
What?
Yeah.
No, they need a quarterback.
Yeah, they need a quarterback.
Go after Kirk. Or actually draft a quarterback. Go after Jaden Daniels or Drake May. Or if Caleb Williams falls to you, Caleb Williams. What the hell? What are they talking about?
Yeah, go after one of those guys. But that's kind of where Pro Football Focus has the offseason going. That's a rough mock-up. We'll definitely have a more of a deep dive going into next week, but kind of a good picture on the top guy a lot of teams could target. Definitely some interesting ones, some head scratchers in there, but I'm excited to see how this free agency unfolds. Definitely a lot of top-notch talent.
Absolutely. This is a great free agency. But I know that now that the NFL is over, now we shift our attention to other sports. As much as we do love the NFL, there are other sports that we are infidelity with. And the NBA is one of those sports. And now this is like the peak time of NBA basketball. NFL is over. The trade deadline just occurred. And now this is the peak of NBA season as we lead into March Madness and inevitably the playoffs.
Yeah, and we had the trade deadline for the NBA. It's definitely one of the most interesting times in the NBA, seeing if any stars are going to be on the move. And it was we had a lot of interesting things happen. The main thing going into it was the Lakers always talk themselves into how they're going to get this massive star, going to make this big play, and they're going to trade an absolute scrub to get him. They're like, yeah, we're definitely going to go out there and get Donovan Mitchell, who is the best player on the Cleveland Cavaliers, signed a long-term deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they're like, well, now that we didn't get him this trade deadline, we're definitely going to trade for him this offseason. I'm like, who? Who are you going to trade for Donovan Mitchell, who is one of the best players or best scorers in the league? He's probably one of the top 25 players in the NBA. And unless you're trading Anthony Davis or LeBron James, sorry, you're not going to get Donovan Mitchell. How do the Lakers talk themselves into this every single offseason? We're like, yeah, we're going to get this really good player and then sign Spencer Dinwiddie. And that was their massive move.
Yeah, and they do this every time. And there's plenty of examples we can point to. Whether it was with Dame, hey guys, how about Talen Horton-Tucker? And the Trailblazers hung up because they thought it was a prank call. Or hey, we have Julius Randle. Can we have Paul George? No. Hangs up immediately, calls the insane asylum. That's just the life of a Lakers fan.
Yeah, that's just the life of a Lakers fan, but it seems like they do this every offseason. When you did get a big player, you pretty much traded every single player on your team to get Anthony Davis. You had Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, Julius Randle,
Lonzo Ball,
who was the prince who was promised coming into the NBA, supposed to be the next Magic Johnson, supposed to be more valuable to the Warriors than Steph Curry is, according to LeVar Ball, and LeVar Ball has never lost, so we all had to believe him, and the Lakers ended up believing him, not taking the player whose idol was Kobe Bryant, not taking the player who wanted to be with the Los Angeles Lakers, not taking the player who was the best player in the draft in Jason Tatum. They're like, no, the guy who shoots like this, that's the guy for our team this year. And They were literally talked into it and scammed by LeVar Ball.
Yeah, no, through the entire process. The Celtics literally traded back from 1 to 3 because they knew that the Lakers were going to take Lonzo because LeVar Ball bullied them into taking Lonzo Ball for the Lakers. So they traded. They knew the Sixers were too stupid, and they knew that the Lakers were pretty much bullied into Lonzo. So like, fuck it. This is the best player in the draft. We'll take him at 3.
Yeah, and that's when the Lakers also were like, yeah, you know what's going to change our team that didn't work before, but we're going to try it again? Magic Johnson running basketball operations. And then Magic ended up being sweet-talked into taking Lonzo. I was like, oh, he reminds me so much of myself. Like, what? Because he's a tall guard who passes? Okay.
Yeah, that was a mistake. And poor Lonzo, I know his injury issues has really come up, but he's a fine role player, but to take him at 2 was just terrible.
Yeah, taking him at 2 was terrible, but there was another team similar to the Lakers. We had the Celtics make a pair of new moves here. They acquired Pat Tillman from the Memphis Grizzlies. They needed a little bit more beef on that front line. Ended up getting him, and they also traded for Jaden Springer from the Philadelphia 76ers for a second-round pick. And they also receive a protected second round pick from the Philadelphia 76ers. But Sixers fans are kind of upset because they had just played the Warriors. They had just played the Mavericks, and Jaden Springer made it very tough for Luka and Steph. He's a 21-year-old. Brad Stevens loves his defensive guards, and they're like, okay, this may be a G League player right now, but he also has proven he can be one of the better defenders in the NBA. His current defensive rating is at 112, but couple under the radar moves for the Celtics, but it adds some depth at the guard position. Hopefully someone who can eventually take Peyton Pritchard's spot, or someone like Sam Hauser. And then Pat Tillman, you need someone who can just give you some energy in the regular season and then the playoffs in case Porzingis goes down or has an ankle injury. So I like both of those moves for Boston.
Yeah, no, I've loved what I've seen from Brad Stevens so far as the GM, and he's made some great moves. And these are some other moves that I think are going to make them take it over the hump against teams like the Heat and Bucks.
Yeah, and then not too much from the Bucks. They traded Robin Lopez, so that's cool. And then they received the draft rights to Demetrius Agrevinus. That's
Yes,
cool.
household name.
The Grizzlies waive Victor Oladipo.
That's okay. That's good.
And then the Philadelphia 76ers acquire Buddy Hield. The Pacers get Furkan Korkmaz and Doug McDermott. And they
There we
also
go.
get a 2024 and a 2029 second round pick, some cash considerations. Is Buddy Hield the missing piece in Philadelphia?
Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I feel like Buddy Hield has been one of those guys who's been in trade talks since his career started. And I remember the Lakers were torn between him and Russell Westbrook. He's a fine player. I think he's good. There seems to be like a cult following with Buddy Hield, especially on Twitter for some
Yeah.
reason, like as if he's the next coming of Jesus. But hey, now he's in Philadelphia. Is he better than James Harden? That question will be answered in Philadelphia. And I'm sure Philly fans, as greasy as they are, will probably say Buddy Hield is better.
Yeah, probably Buddy Hield. I mean, he'll definitely win a game without Joel Embiid against the Boston Celtics in a playoff game. He'll definitely, in a game 5, drop 46 points and 10 assists. Definitely something Buddy Hield can do, but you still don't solve the problem of perimeter defense. And you can't guard anyone on the perimeter, and Joel Embiid still gets defended very well by Al Horford, and he still gets tired in the second round. So unless you increased Joel Embiid's cardio stats and his durability, not really a big addition. Sure. Do you have some more shooting with Buddy Hield? Yes. Is he a turnstile on defense? Still, yes. You still have Tyrese Maxey there. You're still the team, though, that was like, you know what we should do? Jimmy Butler, I know he was the number one guy with the Chicago Bulls. We know he can take a team to the finals in Miami, but you know what we should do? We should sign Tobias Harris. That's a better move, I think, than keeping Jimmy Butler. So you're still the team that chose Tobias over Jimmy Butler. Maybe if you still had Butler, you would have gotten to a finals right now, or even, I don't know, a Eastern Conference finals and passed, the second round.
Yeah, but no, Tobias Harris.
But the biggest part of this trade, and the thing that the Milwaukee Bucks have not had all year, is perimeter defense. They're like, let's bring in Damian Lillard to pair with Giannis. We'll keep Giannis happy, but we'll also trade Drew Holiday, who's our best perimeter on-ball defender. He was the one guarding Jaylen Brown. He's the one guarding Jason Tatum. And you know how we fixed that? With Patrick Beverley. So now Damian Lillard is on the same team as Patrick Beverley. These two have butted heads in the past, but do you think this solves the irreparable, unfixable at time, it seemed, problem in Milwaukee that is perimeter defense?
Maybe to some extent, but my problem is not what he can do for their perimeter defenses. What can he do to that locker room? Because this is the same team that just fired their head coach mid-season when they were second in the East, and they replaced him with Doc Rivers. And then I know that Dame and Giannis have been, kind of figuring things out that first season, but it seems like there's something in the air in Milwaukee that we haven't quite figured out yet. I feel like there's a collapse imminent there. and you go in there and you get Pat Bev. And Pat Beverly, if he was as good as his shit talk, my God, would he be up there with Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
Honest to God. He talks so much shit for somebody who is a role player. And this isn't even a disrespect. I like him as a player. I like the grime. But I don't think for a team that's having chemistry issues and having all these issues internally,
Yeah.
getting Pat Beverly, I don't think this is going to help them long term.
You know what we need with Giannis? Less floor spacing. And as much as we love Patrick Beverly on the show, and as much as he is a pest, Russell Westbrook saying that he runs around waving his hands, chasing people, so it looks like he's doing a lot, but really he's not doing anything at all. We need less floor spacing for Giannis and another guard who can't shoot. Yeah, that seems like that's a genius move. And then another guy in that locker room who's going to cause chemistry issues. And then after he leaves Milwaukee, he's going to go on this tangent probably about Thanasis Antetokounmpo and say, yeah, the Bucks weren't using me right, and it was all because Thanasis was on the team.
Yeah. Can't wait for that podcast.
And then we had drama in Dallas where the Dallas Mavericks could not handle the juicy booty that is Grant Williams. They went in the locker room. They're like, dude, that is too much cake. I turned around. I was like, is that Kim K? Is that Ice Spice, Nicki Minaj, or Cardi B? You're like, no, that is the round ass of Grant Williams. And they just couldn't handle it. They said Grant Williams rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And at one point, it came down to him switching his Luka Doncic shoes to Jason Tatum. And after that, Luka was like, no, get this guy out of Dallas. Send him to the black hole, the just wasteland that if it's not the Pistons at this point, the Magic have turned it around a little bit. It's the Hornets. The Hornets are the other worst team in the NBA right now. And now Grant Williams is kind of stuck in the sunken place, and they traded away again Seth Curry. He's now gone, so you lose another shooter. But you get PJ Washington. He's another good wing. He's athletic, but he's not the shooter of Grant Williams and Seth Curry. And I really like those guys for their floor spacing. I know Grant Williams is undersized, but you also just signed this guy to a massive contract, and the Celtics let him go for a reason. They're like, yes, we love Grant Williams on our team, but do we want to pay him that much money? Absolutely not.
No, and I think he's getting $20 million or something. He's getting a big contract.
Yeah.
But now the Hornets are going to have to pay that. And then Seth Curry, who seems to have played for every single team in the NBA at this point. So he gets to add the Hornets to his list. I know that he's from Charlotte, just like Steph is. So coming home, maybe he'll have some more games and Dell will be in the audience. So that's good for Seth Curry, I guess.
Yeah, and then after that, the Knicks made a trade with the Pistons. They got rid of Evan Fournier, Malechi Flynn, Quentin Grimes, Ryan whatever his last name is, 2 future second-round picks, some cash consideration. But you get Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic. Bogdanovic has always been a good shooter. He can get hot at times. Does this solve any problems for the Knicks? Does it get them past the second round? Probably not, but at least you made a move. You did something.
Yeah, I've actually really liked what I've seen from the Knicks this year. I like when they went after Anunoby. I liked them getting RJ Barrett out of the building because I just don't think it was working out for them. So I actually do like the moves that they've made, and I don't think they're necessarily past the second round team, but I do think that they're considerably better now.
Yeah, they're definitely considerably better. So credit to the Knicks for at least staying active and trying to get a little bit better each year. You're just missing that one big star, and then you have Julius Randle there, who at one point was the worst playoff performer, not just last year, but maybe of all time.
Worst shooting percentage of all time.
Yeah, worst shooting percentage of all time, but we'll see what the Knicks do, but another good move from them. And then the Thunder, I really like this trade for Gordon Hayward. Another trade with the Hornets, who are very active, where you trade away whatever his first name, Mitchich, Trey Mann, David Bertans. The Hornets also get 2 second-round picks and some cash considerations, but you like this Gordon Hayward trade.
Yeah, so for Gordon Hayward, he's somebody who I feel like has been good everywhere he's played. The issue has been his injury history, but for him, I mean, what the Thunder really need him to be is a shooter and a veteran presence, because right now they're one of the youngest teams in the NBA. So I saw this move. I said, you know what? Gordon Hayward, he's been in the league for about a decade. He's a decent shooter, and I think that locker room presence, he's not a guy that has a big ego. He's not quite to the level of the guy I'm about to mention, but kind of at the end of his career, a JJ Redick figure, veteran shooter, can help those young guys mature. I think that he's one of those guys that's going to fit well with them.
Yeah, I think he's gonna fit well. I just like Gordon Hayward in Oklahoma. I think that's a good fit. You're like in Big Sky country there. He's gonna have a nice gamer rig set up there, and I think he's someone who's good to sit on the end of your bench, and he can just be that calming presence. He can still get a bucket, has that turnaround shot there, and then he can help Josh Giddey work through some of his emotional issues. You still have Shea on that team. It's a very young team at this point, trying to get to the next steps. He can let them know kind of what happened in Boston, some of the pitfalls there. But the Thunder are always one of those teams who make really good trades, acquire a lot of draft picks. So I like Gordon Hayward on this team. And then you really didn't give up too much to get him. So I like this a lot. And probably the most active team was the Hornets this offseason. And they got probably 10 second round picks at this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for this is the team that has to blow up. Now I'm curious if in the offseason, will they keep LaMelo? Will he be on the move? What their next steps are? Are they going to trade some of these other guys that are there? I think that they need to blow it up and just start all new.
Yeah, blow up and start all new. And then second round picks for me, it's kind of a pet peeve because it's something that's thrown in NBA trades. But unless you're good at drafting or you get really lucky, I mean, it's kind of like trading for a fifth or a sixth round pick in the NFL. Can you get an elite guy? Sure. Are you gonna get an elite guy? Maybe, but it's
Yeah.
also just something you can package in a trade. But I'm not sure what the Hornets are doing. But now you have LaMelo, Seth Curry, you have some shooters on that team. Get rid of PJ Washington. Maybe you can do something, but you still need, 2 to 3 really good players on that team.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the second round pick, Laura, you think about it, you look at the old NBA drafts and these 30 picks that they take in the second round, you're lucky if maybe 5 of them pan out and be even just like active role players. So, like the Draymonds, the Jokic, and some of these other figures that have been great in the second round, those are not the norm.
Yeah.
And if they can hit on one, if they can get a nice role player from this, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Hornets, you did something. So you were active this trade deadline, moved a lot of players around, helped facilitate a lot of trades. So at least for being a facilitator team, for making a lot of things happen, I'll give you credit there. And then I just have to talk about this player because he is a star in this league.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, Kelly Olynyk. He may be the Cole Kmet of the NBA, just without the talent. But Kelly Olynyk, he's going home. He was watching Fast and Furious 7. He was thinking, it's been a long time without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I'm sipping on maple syrup again in Canada. Kelly Olynyk, you're free from the Jazz. You're on the Toronto Raptors now. You're going back home to Canada. Salute to you, Kelly, friend of the show. We'll see you again when you're back on the pod.
Yeah, when you're back on the pod. And the Jazz get Wilt Chamberlain's grandson, Otto Porter. And then I can't see the rest of that compensation. Kira Lewis and a first-round pick. Good for the Jazz. The Jazz have so many first-round picks at this point. I like what they're doing. So it's a shame that they got rid of Kelly Olynyk, but now Kelly Olynyk can hang out with the Nelk boys and Drake, and sip it up on some maple syrup.
Yeah, I can sip on some maple syrup there, but it's kind of credit to Danny Ainge for finessing a first-round pick from the Toronto Raptors. It seems like Danny Ainge is just a master of acquiring picks, but he really doesn't know what to do with them. So if you want to rebuild a team, you want to acquire a lot of capital, he is one of the best traders of all time. But when it comes to making that big move, unless he can call his best friend and be like, hey, can I trade you Al Jefferson, who fell off a cliff after they traded him for Kevin Garnett? I'm like, okay, call up Kevin McHale, and then Ray Allen, he signs there. So I don't know, unless he has any other friends that he can trade a massive star to Utah. I just don't see Utah. I don't know. I want them to be good, but can they?
The only person I can think of that has connections is like Larry Bird in Indiana, but they're not going to give him Halliburton. They're not going to give him maybe Pascal Siakam.
It's going to be like, can I trade you Lauri Markkanen for, Sabonis isn't there anymore. I was like, can I give you Lauri Markkanen for Miles Turner?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I want them to be good, but he's good at acquiring talent, but can he get those picks? I don't know.
Yeah, but it was definitely an active trade deadline. We didn't see any major stars move, but we saw the Boston Celtics bolster up some of the talent there. Thunder get Gordon Hayward and some veteran presence on that team. Knicks get some more role players, but talk about the Bucks. What probably the biggest loser along with the Lakers, you go from getting Donovan Mitchell to how about I do you one better and Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, I think of those two, the Lakers, it's all delusion. But for the Bucks, this is like you're seeing the fall of the Roman Empire before your very eyes. And maybe that's a bit hyperbole, but a team that won the title not too long ago, and then now they're having these locker room issues. They trade for Dame, big move, and then lost a lot of their defense. Their defense isn't nearly the same. And now their solution was firing their head coach and getting Doc Rivers, and then bringing in Pat Beverly, who I think is a subtraction by addition in this case. I think
Yeah.
he's going to hurt them a lot. And I just don't see them. I can't see them beating the Heat or the Celtics.
Yeah, I can't see them beating the Heat or the Celtics. And because Miami, before the trade deadline, another player, another trade that the Hornets facilitated. We talked about how the Hornets have been the facilitator this NBA season as far as trades go and moving players around. And whether it's the Mavericks, the Pistons, just doing favors for everyone in the league. Miami signs Terry Rozier. They were, as far as like win shares, one of the lower paced teams in the league with Kyle Lowry. They send him over to the Hornets, get Terry Rozier, who's shown he can be a 20-point scorer in the playoffs, had a really good run when he was with the Celtics, kicking Eric Bledsoe's ass when they played the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round there. So I think with Miami, they even made a really big addition when it comes to Terry Rozier, and he'll be another good on-ball defender, but he's someone who can push the pace, actually score, and take a little bit of pressure off of Bam and Jimmy Butler. And the Heat are kind of just one of those teams, like we talked about the Chiefs and the Patriots, who lay low in the regular season. Then when it comes to the playoffs, they just turn it up to another level. No one sees it coming, and they kick everyone's ass.
Yeah, and I think that this is such a great trade for the Heat because Terry Rozier, I think, also fits the culture of Miami perfectly. Talking about a guy who's a grinder, talking about a guy who can push the envelope, piss people off. He was a guy who made LeBron pissed off several times when they faced him back in the day. So I think that he's going to be a perfect fit for them, especially because Kyle Lowry's been great for them. Don't get me wrong, but moving him and then getting Terry Rozier, someone who's significantly younger. Kyle Lowry can retire in Charlotte. I heard it's nice and warm there. He'll enjoy it there. Not quite to the level of Miami, but he can ride off in the sunset in Charlotte.
Yeah, it can definitely ride off in the sunset in Charlotte, but it's definitely going to be a fun NBA playoffs. And is it just me, or does the NBA, it kind of went through a little bit of lull? And we had the Warriors and the Cavs and LeBron kind of running through the league. We had the Spurs. It was either the Spurs, the Heat, or the Warriors. Everyone was a little bit tired from the Warriors, but it seems like the league is starting to get really good again, where we have a lot of star players, whether it's the Celtics loaded up, whether it's Giannis in Milwaukee, the Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler, and now the Cavs and the Knicks are a little bit frisky here. And then look at a team like the Mavericks, who's played well with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic this season. You look at Joker. You look at how good the Clippers have been this year, where they're
Mhm.
starting to have a resurgence. It's like setting up for a really interesting NBA playoffs, where you suddenly look up and you're like, oh, everyone was clowning the Clippers for that James Harden trade. He's starting to take on the role of the facilitator. You're bringing Russell Westbrook off of the bench. And one thing Russell Westbrook can be is just that energizer bunny for you. And now you put him and PG and then James Harden and Kawhi. It's going to be a fun NBA playoffs. And then the Spurs, can they get another star and then start to be really good maybe 3-4 years from now?
Yeah, no, I think what the NBA was missing for the longest time, and even in the 2000s, it was really like the Lakers and Spurs in the West, and then maybe the Mavericks occasionally. But like now, there's not really any like clear favorites. You have the guys who you point out, like the Celtics, Bucks, and the Nuggets and the Heat, who have all been in the mix there. But even some new faces, like you still have a team like the Thunder who are finally there. Chet Holmgren obviously was injured last year. He's been playing great for them. The Mavericks you mentioned as well. Thunder look fantastic. Like top to bottom, they have such a great roster and a lot of young talent. So, like, this is an NBA playoffs where it feels like there's a lot of things that can happen. We have these narratives that can be formed. Can Jimmy Butler finally get his first title? Can Jason Tatum and the Celtics finally get over the hump? Can Giannis win his second title? Can Joker win his second title? Like, we're seeing the 2020s being shaped as we speak, and it's fascinating because I feel like it's still wide open.
Yeah, it's still wide open. Like the Nuggets are definitely really good and they should be the favorites to win the finals again, but can you see someone upsetting them? Maybe. Yeah, and then
Mhm.
in the East it's like Boston still has that monkey if Porzingis is he going to stay healthy? That's still a question mark and they're really relying on him to take them over the top there, but he's free from Luca right now. He doesn't have to tell someone to tell Luca to stop crying on the bench in that famous video. And then you still have Miami with Jimmy Butler. Eric Spoelstra just signed an extension. Brad Stevens as a GM. It's definitely a lot of good things happening in the NBA, and hopefully, the Timberwolves can actually pull it together here.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that one.
Yeah, because I know Rudy Gobert. I know friend of the show, Rudy Gobert.
Something like
He's
that.
kind of our Deron Bland of the NBA, I guess, where he gave away the most capital for them, and then he said he was upset he wasn't an all-star
Yeah,
selection. He's like, yeah, keep sleeping on me. I'm having the best year of my career, man.
that's awesome. 10 points, 4 blocks. That's great. Defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, at it again.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear anything about Mr. Rudy Gobert. He is just one of those guys that I'm just going to consistently shit on. No offense to him.
Yeah, no offense to Rudy Gobert. I know there is another artist who causes a lot of people offense, and he makes them wake up and they're like, oh, I'm offended just because he exists.
He does
And
exist.
I know he has a tendency to say he's going to release an album, not release an album. You are a fan of this guy because he's literally changed music with
Mhm.
albums like 808s and Heartbreak, Yeezus, the Graduation trilogy that was pretty amazing there. And then you have other albums that are solid, like Donda. He even delved into the Lecrae genre of gospel music, but there were a lot of bees in the studio where he wasn't able to put out the album. He said, "Sorry, I can't release the album today. There's a bee in the studio." But you had a bet with your friend that he wouldn't release the album, but we ended up getting Vultures this year with Ty Dolla $ign and Kanye West, one of the most influential artists in hip hop, maybe of all time, outside of someone like Dr. Dre. What were your initial thoughts on this album?
Yeah, so we had a bet because Kanye is infamously the guy who never releases his albums on time. In fact, this one was supposed to come out in October. He delayed it, and then he delayed it, and then he delayed it. Supposed to come out on New Year's Eve. He delayed it. Supposed to come out last week. He delayed it, and then here we are now. So I was like, he's not going to release it. He's an asshole. If you want to talk about a person that being a fan of is probably the hardest, talking about like level of like maybe being a Chargers fan in the NFL, the difference is that the Chargers have never made 808s and heartbreaks, but that's a whole another story.
Yeah.
Very frustrating as a fan, not just because of some of the shit that he says, and there's some very obvious ones that he said 2 years ago and the last 2 years. We don't even need to get into that because that's not our avenue, but
Yeah.
you can read it. There's Google, read up on it, and
Yeah.
some of the shit he said and some of the shit he said in the past. The album itself, though, the thing with Kanye is with all the noise that he says, with all the noise, all the controversy that he arises with, whether it's with Taylor Swift or with everybody else, when he releases the album, he releases the album of the year candidates. He releases albums that will be remembered for the whole decade. He did that in 2010s, and in Vultures in 2024, he's made the best album of 2024 so far. And the production on it was incredible from the start, top to bottom. I definitely like it better than Donda as far as production wise, and I feel like the songs themselves, like the listening experience of Vultures, is more enjoyable. It's less convoluted as well. And I think the features, like a lot of these artists are people who I don't historically listen to. Not always a big Playboy Cardi fan, but Playboy Cardi had some decent verses on there. And I really think that for him, like the hooks with Ty Dolla $ign work super well with them. I think the complement of them, historically, it's always been like a Kid Cudi and somebody else kind of doing the hooks for them. But now you have Ty Dolla $ign, nice smooth R&B vocals, along with Kanye's production and his verbose as well. So I really like it so far. I definitely think that I think it's his best album since Life of Pablo.
Yeah, I definitely think it is too. I think it's a good return to form from Kanye, and I honestly didn't know what to expect from this album because I had forgot that Ty Dolla $ign had been on this album, and like he's kind of hit or miss for me. Like he's a good artist, but am I thinking about Ty Dolla $ign like when I think of like best artists in music? Not really. But I thought his vocals like blended really well with the instrumentals, and there's some songs where he really was able to elevate it. And then I thought when he would do a hook and then Kanye would come on and start to do the hook, it was another really good layer on it. And when you have an artist who uses autotune, I think someone like Travis Scott is really good at using autotune as not just vocals but as part of the instrumental, because you can also layer the voice, you have some additional echoes, and then when you give someone as creative as Kanye as a producer to just play with those extra vocals, extra layers on top of it, I thought it added a really good part to the album, especially because it still is very much a Kanye West album. You still had some funny songs like Naked Big Titty Women's
Yeah.
Naked Big
Beautiful
Titty Women.
big titty women don't jump out of the sky. You know?
Beautiful big titty women just don't jump out of the sky. And then for me, I'm like, I would prefer to have the features on the album, but I listened to the album in the gym, so I wasn't sure who was actually on it. So when someone like Lil Durk would come on the album, someone like Travis Scott would come on the album, it was a nice surprise. And I thought all of the features were really good. They definitely added to it. And as far as like albums of hip hop recently, I just hate the stigma where people are like, yeah, everyone in hip hop is trash and there's no real lyricist. I'm like, well, we had a Killer Mike album last year. We had a Nas album last year. We had someone like T Grizzly last year dropped a banger of an album start to finish. And while someone like him is not the best lyricist, it's still like fun, really good music. So it's like, there's plenty of talented artists in hip hop, and I think this album, production wise, I wasn't the biggest fan of Donda, and I think mostly just because of the first song, where it's just like the same thing over and over, like didn't really set the right tone for it. But I thought this one, not knowing what to expect, I thought the drums were good, the instrumentals were good, and it's going to be an album where the more I listen to it, the more I'm going to pick up on different things in the instrumentals and the lyrics. And I thought it was a really good time, and I just didn't know what to expect from it. I was like, oh wow, that was actually a banger from start to finish. And in the gym, that's usually the toughest time for me to listen to an artist or an album for the first time. And I was like, okay, banger from front to back. And I couldn't really think of any songs where I was like, oh, I didn't hate that. And you still had the Kanye isms in it where you can tell, like, okay, the crazier this guy gets, the better he is. And I think really the one of the biggest things I was impressed with was Ty Dolla $ign has some nice cheeks. I know it's like it's a collab
the
album, so
cover.
on the cover I didn't expect Ty Dolla $ign to put
Dude, he's
himself
caked
out there
up.
like that. I
With the
thought
Kim
it was
K build.
I thought it was Grant Williams at first, but it was like, congrats
No.
to you, Ty Dolla $ign.
Yeah, if you got it, flaunt it. That's what they always say.
Yeah.
I think for me, like the thing that I like about this album compared to his recent albums, and I haven't really been a fan of like Ye, Jesus is King, Donda, and like some of his other projects since Life of Pablo, because I feel like he's one of those guys. We know how he's
Yeah.
very smart. You know, obviously he's a genius and he's got all these things going for him. But when it comes to making like a concept album, he's not a person like a Roger Waters or other artists who have done cover albums in the past where he's not concise always. You can see that by just listening to his interviews. And I feel like Ye was a little too short for me. Jesus is King was a little too gospel, and then Donda was just way too long. It's like 3 hours if you listen to the deluxe version. This is an album where I think he just made a couple of hits, he put them all together, and it's just a fun listening experience. Like this is an album you can re-listen to. If you try to re-listen to Donda, it's going to be a 4-day process. You try to listen to Ye, you're going to blink and it's going to be over. And now it's like, all right, he's got a couple of hits. Carnival, great song. Immediately, instant classic. Burn, great song. Back to Me, Beautiful Big Titty Women, Just Don't Jump Out of the Sky. Like there's some people that when they make an album, it can only be made by that person. And I feel like Kanye with Vultures and really a lot of his projects, it's like not a lot of people can mimic what he does.
Yeah, except for Travis Scott, but not as well.
Yeah, Travis Scott does it at a C+ grade, but
yeah, the problem with him is he doesn't have the lyricism, and he's not as good of a rapper, and he's not as good of a producer.
And he also does way too much codeine.
He does way too much codeine, and Kanye does a little bit too much of, I don't know exactly what it is, but
he just doesn't take his meds.
Yeah.
And that'll do it for him.
That'll do it. And he's someone who like he tries to convince you of being sane. It's like, you know what? For artists, especially musicians, it seems like the crazier they are, the better the music is. And there's a reason why the most famous artists of all time are either batshit crazy, drug addicts, heroin addicts, or like you name it, but it
Or die
brings
young.
out the best musical product that they can possibly get. And this was another one, like as far as hip hop right now, I don't see it like creating a different genre, but just the production, the concept of it, I thought was really good all around. And it set the tone earlier in this year where we had some diss tracks back and forth with January of some lesser known artists, Meg the Stallion and Nicki Minaj, going back and forth. Then you have someone as controversial as Kanye West releasing an album, and no matter what you think of him, there are plenty of people who behind closed doors are not a great person, and Kanye West has said some pretty questionable things at
Deplorable.
best, racist things, anti-Semitic things when he went on that tangent. But what did Little Dicky say? He went and he said Little Dicky said that Kanye West, he can tell that he loves people. Lil Dicky gave him the pass. And then also Seth Rogen, the most important moment of Seth Rogen's life, where Kanye rapped Jesus a cappella to him in a car where he's just right here. I can't imagine like Kanye West just a cappella be like, yeah, my theme song, my leather black jeans on. This is like, since it's such an album where it's just like the production is going boom, boom, and he
Mhm.
like created those massive theatrical 808s, or where he's talking about a song a cappella. Imagine I'm in it from Kanye West being saying to you a cappella, where he's just
Mhm.
right there in your face, like eating Asian pussy. Yeah, I call it sweet and sour sauce.
Yeah.
But you know, Seth Rogen and Lil Dicky, they're on his side, so I don't know.
We might as well be on his side too.
We might as well be on his side as well, at least when it comes to the music that he makes.
Yeah, you can, we don't support the shit he said, especially
No,
on that Alex Jones infamous interview. But
yeah,
at the same time, like if you're somebody who is able, which not everyone is, able to separate the artist from the art, you can listen to that album and appreciate it. There's a lot of great songs on there, and I think that it's going to be one of those albums that's going to be in circulation for some time. So I
yeah.
enjoyed it. I give it a good rating. I think it's very good. Best album since Life of Pablo, and I'm excited. He's supposed to drop 2 more Vultures projects this year, but we know Kanye. He was also supposed to drop a lot of things that he didn't. So
Yeah.
don't hold your breath. But if this is all he releases, awesome.
Some more bees in the studio, maybe.
Yeah, some more bees, or maybe he just won't release it. Maybe he'll release a trailer for it, says it's
Yeah.
coming out, and then he just never does, because he
Yeah.
did that with Yandi. So anything is possible. So yeah, we'll expect it from there. But
Yeah. Overall, do you think this is an album where people are going to be like, so like, Kanye West, you have like the Ozzy Osbourne, people speaking out against him. He has said some deplorable things over the past few years. Well, people are kind of, it's going to be radioactive. They'll quietly put on their headphones when no one else is around. They're like, oh, okay. Then it'll start to take off like a little bit later, like kind of like a cult classic movie where maybe everyone doesn't jump on it right away, but then you pick it up a little bit later when the toxicity has died down. You're like, actually, kind of a banger.
I think it's going to happen actually pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have been waiting for this, and I think now that he's officially released it, there's going to be some people who don't like check it out initially, but when they do, they'll appreciate it, because I think it's just one of those albums that it's just easy and fun to listen to.
Yeah, definitely easy and fun to listen to. One of the best artists of our time, and he's someone who should be appreciated. I mean, he had one of the greatest 3 album runs, and then 808s and Heartbreaks, Yeezus, Life of Pablo, even The Kids See Ghosts. I thought that was a pretty solid project, and I'm someone who doesn't mind Jesus is King. I like the Chick-fil-A song.
Yeah, I think that he's one of those people that the reason why his fans wait for him to release these albums, and the reason why he teases them and edges them along for years on end, is because when he actually releases a project, chances are it's going to be good, whether it's College Dropout, Late Registration, Graduation, all the albums that he come out with. And even if his worst project is Jesus is King, the fact that that's his worst album, and that's still a very good album at the end of the day. And then there's Donda as well. Like, he's somebody who when it comes to like, Quentin Tarantino always talks about his films and his filmography and how important it is to him, and how he wants to have a set of classics. For Kanye, his discography is pretty much at the top of pretty much anybody else's. So I think that this will be a nice part of it.
Yeah, and I can't think of another artist who's like hit a slump like he did, where it wasn't like bad necessarily, but it wasn't like with Kanye, you're expecting your life to be changed. You're expecting the universe to pause. I can't remember an artist kind of like go through like a slump that he did and then return with the album after all of that controversy, him going missing, people wondering if he's a clone or not, and then dropping this out of the blue on a Saturday with no one expecting him, and then it being a banger from front to back.
Yeah, no, this is a hell of a comeback album. He's had a couple of them because he's happened to say a lot of crazy shit over the last 20 years. But I think this is going to be a big comeback album, and I think Yeezy season approaching.
Yeah, Yeezy season approaching, and then the only thing we need from Kanye now is a sample of "Take Me Higher" from Grade.
Yeah, and then after that, we'll be saved, and maybe we'll see that on Vultures too. But we reviewed the Super Bowl. We reviewed the NBA trade deadline. We talked about the NBA at large. We also talked about Kanye. We talked about just about everything.
Yeah.
So
Talked about bees in the studio.
yeah, so I say we wrap this up. We talk about some offseason next week, but until then, stay brick.